Well, 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 well. My, how things have changed since you and I last spoke yesterday at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. I think all of us were operating off the assumption that the starting center for the Utah Jazz next year would be Walker Kessler. And now the starting center for the Utah Jazz right now appears to be Yusuf Nurkic, and Walker Kessler now lives in Los Angeles. Hello. How are you? Drive time, Wednesday afternoon style. 5 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. We'll get you halfway through that work week and one day closer to the weekend right here on this program that's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's my name. Porter Larson producing the program today. So good to have you with us. Keep calm and carry on. Now, this is one of the deals. We're going to go through it a bunch of different angles. I'll tease right now that the man who told us about 2.5 years ago Walker Kessler may not have wanted to live here or play here, Tim McMahon, is going to join us coming up at 3:30 today. So set your alarm for 3:30 when Tim McMahon will join the show. I would imagine he's going to have a lot of explanation for how this exactly went down and how did we get here. What are we doing? What's going on? And I'll also tease that Richard Smith is going to join us for an entire hour at 4 o'clock. So we'll get into the front office side of this with Smitty. And then Tim McMahon knows Walker well. He knows his reps well. So stay tuned for that. Our dear friend Amy Donaldson from KSL will join us for an hour. Keep you up to date on the World Cup action. The game going on right now between Senegal and Belgium is of note because the winner will advance to play potentially the U.S. if the U.S. beats Bosnia tonight at 6 o'clock Mountain Time. The U.S. men's national team back in action. It's game day. Soccer fans get pumped for that. Harry Kane of Tottenham fame, once upon a time, with a late brace to allow England to come back earlier today when it looked like they were in trouble to lose to the Congo. But England marches on. God save the Queen. You know what? Shout out to the Queen on a Wednesday.
Stop it.
I just want to give the Queen a shout out.
It's almost the 4th of July.
I just want to give the Queen a shout out. I don't feel like the Queen gets enough love. The Queen deserves a shout out.
Well, I'm going to keep the balance and not shout out the Queen on the show today.
Is she still with us?
Isn't there always
she passed
a queen?
away.
The Queen did pass away. But isn't there always like some form of royal?
I'm going to ask you to do a little research. I believe the oligarchy is now being ruled by a man. I'm not sure which one. I know one of them's a total perv, and he's out of the scene. That guy was weird. I'm going to shout out the Queen. You can get mad if you want. I'm going to shout out the Queen on a Wednesday. England advanced and marched on.
So yeah, Charles III is currently the king. The Queen is dead, but you know.
Okay, what's up, Chuck?
Shout out, I guess.
Just running the country, doing your thing. Anyway, World Cup updates. Weird start to the show. Mostly we're going to talk NBA offseason. How did we get here with Walker? It is wild. So, look, we'll get into it. Let's actually do that. Okay, Amy Donaldson, Tim McMahon, Richard Smith. And before Amy joins us to start things off on this lovely, beautiful Wednesday afternoon outside, courtesy of our good friends at DraftKings, it's time now for your opening tip. Now, DraftKings is live in all 50 states. Yes, that means you, Utah. Win or go home, that's it. That's the World Cup knockout round. And DraftKings has you covered for every single match. The DraftKings app is now live in Utah, so whether you're catching the early kickoff before work or the late match at the bar, you're in on every minute, every match, every moment, all in one app. Right here in Utah, the world's biggest stage is in the palm of your hand. New DraftKings customers, sign up with the promo code ESPN700, spend $5, get $200 in total rewards over 21 days. That's promo code ESPN700. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Speaking of the crown, shout out to the Queen. Event trading offered by DraftKings Predictions, a CFTC-registered introducing broker. Trading involves risk of loss. Market availability varies. Eligibility restrictions apply. $50 every 7 days via click-to-claim issued in non-withdrawable prediction dollars that expire in 1 year. That ends on July the 19th. Terms can be found at dkng.co/predictions promo. Are you serious? Did you say that on air?
No, that was off air, but yes, serious.
All right. Well, we do have a little bit of breaking news. Porter, go ahead and say it out loud. I can't even say it with a straight face. Go ahead.
I had to do it.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
2 years, $12 million. Jackson Hayes is now a Jazz man.
All right. So the Lakers and the Jazz essentially swapped centers. Jackson Hayes is now brought in to compete with Yusuf Nurkic for the starting center position for the Utah Jazz. Now, in a vacuum, we can't spin this as anything other than bad news. We can also say out loud the Jazz did really well as it pertains to what they received in return. I mean, they got a ton of value for Walker. Okay, so if you're looking for a piece of good news, there's that. 4 unprotected first-round picks is wild, okay? They have the right to swap in 28 and 30, and then completely unprotected first-round picks in 2031 and 2033. For a frame of reference, Boston's asking price for Jaylen Brown as of now appears to be 4 first-round picks, and nobody wants to do that. And the Lakers just did that for Walker Kessler, okay? Now, it brings into play what will those picks look like, because if you have not been following the ownership transfer news, and you shouldn't because you probably have a life, the Lakers have new owners. It's the same owners that own the LA Dodgers. Now, in baseball, you can write blank checks. You cannot do that in basketball, but in basketball, if you want to pay punitive luxury tax penalties, you can spend a lot of money, and the Lakers are cashing checks, they're writing checks, they're spending money in a way that, quite frankly, they never could when the Buss family owned the team. A little like, well, it's probably pretty well known now because there was a documentary and a book about it. The Lakers have never been the richest team in the NBA. They've never been owned by the most wealthiest people in sports ownership or basketball ownership. You know, Dr. Jerry Buss, all due respect, a bit of a smoke and mirrors, like real estate dude, and no one's really sure how he made his money. And if you watch the show, John C. Reilly, shout out to Jeff Pearlman who wrote the book. The Lakers now have new owners, and Jeannie Buss is still involved, but very rich, powerful people with very deep pockets are now writing checks for the LA Lakers. So they're simply going to be able to spend with the biggest boys available and the biggest teams out there. And so it does make you wonder what exactly those draft picks will look like. It's always a fair thing, okay? Like when the Jazz traded Donovan and when they traded Rudy, all the media around here, several whom cut checks from the Utah Jazz, were like, hey, what a haul. Holy smokes. That's a lot for those guys. Hold on. Wait and see. And it's a great way to facilitate a rebuild if you're going to move on from a star player, if you're going to move on from a few star players. You want tremendous draft capital, flexibility, financially, and young prospects that could turn into something. So what Danny did, and now Austin, his son, is running the show, if you're going to move on from him, that's the way you do it. The issue now is the Jazz were supposed to be in this spot where this year that stuff was done. And it still is for the most part, but it cannot be spun any other way that for today, even though the draft compensation is pretty stunning, what the Lakers were willing to do to send essentially 4 unprotected first-round picks to the Jazz, even though 2 of them are swaps, still unprotected, in exchange for Walker Kessler. If you're going to do that deal, you got a lot of value. We have to be very clear about that before we get into this. But it absolutely brings up the question as to what is going to happen next. So as Porter just referenced, the breaking news is Jackson Hayes and now Yusuf Nurkic. Well, I should say Yusuf Nurkic and now Jackson Hayes. The Jazz have signed Jackson Hayes, who played for the Lakers and did not play very well. He's a talented athlete. He's a little bit like Jericho Sims, who played for the Knicks. The Knicks lost Mitchell Robinson today, by the way. He went to Boston. We'll get to the rest of the NBA free agency stuff once upon a time. So Jackson Hayes, Yusuf Nurkic, because here's the thing, for anyone that may not be familiar with Jaren Jackson Jr. as a player, because you didn't watch much Memphis Grizzlies basketball because, well, you know, you can get by playing Triple J at 5 here and there. If that's your plan, you're in trouble. He's not a center. He never has been. He doesn't like to play the position. He has said that out loud. He's not an elite rebounder. Jaren Jackson Jr. is not an elite rebounder. He's an incredibly effective defensive player, and he's a guy whose offensive game has really blossomed into something that I never actually thought it could be. He's not a great rebounder. He's a good rim protector for his position, but he's not a center. He's not a 5. So Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes are your options now as your starting center. Or Does Will Hardy have something up his sleeve? Because we do need to ask the question, and Tim McMahon will join us coming up in a little bit. When did the Jazz see this coming? I'm not going to do the windhorse fingers, what's going on in Utah, because as you heard on the show yesterday, when Ryan Smith and Austin Ainge were on the program, they both used Walker's name. This was yesterday. They both used Walker's name out loud as part of the plan, not just this year, but moving forward. Austin, on 3 separate occasions, talked about how big they were going to be. And when you talk about how big the Jazz were going to be, it obviously included, their biggest player, who is Walker Kessler. After the Darren Peterson addition, most people believed the starting lineup was going to be Keontae George, Darren Peterson, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Walker Kessler, who now lives in Los Angeles. So does Will Hardy, does the coaching staff see something here where maybe they can unlock a lineup of Jaren Jackson Jr., Lauri Markkanen, Ace Bailey, Keontae George, and Darren Peterson, now that Walker Kessler is in Los Angeles and your 2 centers are Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes? Let me stop here and say that Yusuf Nurkic played really well for the Utah Jazz last year. You could make an argument that he actually resurrected his pro basketball career in Will Hardy's system. When they signed Yusuf Nurkic to a 2-year, $22 million deal, my antennas went up a little bit, but not near enough to believe that they did that for anything other than having him to back up Walker Kessler. That was my take on the whole thing. And now Yusuf Nurkic is probably your starting center next year for the Utah Jazz. Last year, Nurk played in 41 games. He started in 36 of them. And look, these are nice numbers. Averaged 11 points, averaged 10 boards, 5 assists, less than 1 block shot because the Jazz just lost their elite rim protector. And they just lost one of the point of attack defensive players in the case that you play Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. Have you noticed that everybody in the league is trying to get bigger? It's kind of a new deal. Everyone in the league, even if you have a center, you want to grab another one. Giannis, Bam, Miami's bigger. Boston went after Mitchell Robinson. They've got former Aggie Nimi Keita. They're bigger. The Lakers are now bigger with Walker Kessler. The Jazz just lost, by far, their best rim protector and best interior defensive player. We can't spin it. You're going to hear a lot of whoa, what a haul. And like I said, it's okay to say a few things at once about what's actually real. And the Jazz receiving 4 unprotected first-round picks for Walker Kessler is a really good return for a center that's never made the All-Star team and a center that's coming off season-ending shoulder surgery last year. All the metrics say that Walker Kessler is among the elite rim protectors and shot blockers in all of pro basketball. And the Jazz are going to lose that this year. So as the story goes, there are so many things about this where we're going to have to learn about it moving forward because, again, whether it's Austin Ainge, Ryan Smith, Danny Ainge, Will Hardy, Justin Zanuck, you can go listen to any of their interviews on any shows and any platforms. Whenever any of them was asked about the future for the Utah Jazz, they all talked about Walker as being part of it. So if we read the tea leaves a little bit, remember, and again, Tim McMahon's going to join us at 3:30, so about an hour and 12 minutes. I want to say, Porter, when would you say, in my mind, I want to say 2 years, when would you say Tim started coming on this show to report that Walker wasn't thrilled with how things were going?
I mean, at least last summer when we were discussing this as coming into Walker's contract year. I don't know that it would have been a conversation before that. At least, it coming up naturally as far as is a guy going into his contract year. But yeah, I mean, he's been on it for at least the last calendar year, maybe more.
It feels like it's at least a year, if not more, because one of the early McMahon reports had nothing to do with contract negotiations. It had everything to do with Walker hating losing. And all these guys do. But the reports were there was an extra disdain from Walker about the choices the Jazz were making to lose intentionally to hold on to draft capital. That's when my antennas first started going up. But all of the things that were propagated by the team and the messaging from the Jazz, and remember, you're rarely getting the truth from any of these teams. They just want to spin the messaging so you believe what they want you to believe. That's the game. I've been on both sides of it. I know how to play it. There was never anything other than we love Walker. He's put in the work. We're proud of him. He's developed. And how about, penny for your thoughts on Walker Kessler's Instagram post, kids? We talked about this. The natives were restless. Jazz fans were nervous. Walker's like, watch this, kids. Pulls out the old IG. Posts a photo of him hiking. I love Utah. Right? That was the deal. I love Utah. Not going anywhere. And so we saw the IG post and we were all thrilled. And man, how things change very quickly. I am very curious as to when the Jazz first started to get an idea that this was possible. Now, as the story goes, the Jazz offered Walker Kessler a 5-year, $140 million contract, which, as I talked about, felt like it was very, very fair. And apparently Walker and his camp didn't love that offer. Or was it Los Angeles all along? Was this all a smokescreen for Walker Kessler and his agent, Aaron Mintz, who is probably the most powerful super agent out there right now? Because according to Dave McMenamin, who, by the way, will join the show tomorrow, the Lakers have made several inquiries to the Jazz over the past couple of years to try to acquire Walker Kessler. Kessler and his reps, aware of the Lakers' interest, had eyed Los Angeles as a future destination for quite some time. And now today the deal is made. And Walker Kessler has been traded to the LA Lakers. One of the best offensive rebounders in the league since he started, averaging 11.1 points, 12.2 boards. He led the league in 4.6 offensive rebounds, also 2.4 blocks per game. There is one player who's averaged more blocks per game than Walker since he entered the league in 2022. He plays for San Antonio. It's not Harrison Barnes. I think you know who it is. This is a loss. In the short term for this season, this changes the calculation of who the Utah Jazz can be. Austin and Danny Ainge now have four more unprotected first-round picks in their pocket. That's not nothing. If you were going to lose him, to get that type of value in a trade makes it somewhat digestible long-term. But as I always say, fans don't cheer for draft capital. Fans don't cheer for cap space. Good tools for front offices to have in their pocket to build a roster. Go build a roster. Use the draft capital, as they did for Jaren Jackson Jr. And, by the way, their cap space, too. That essentially was the pre-free agency trade that we talked about. But you're going to battle in the Western Conference with big physical teams. You just made the Lakers better. I mean, it also stings that this is the Lakers, because the Lakers are not better. They're bigger. It was the right thing to do, probably, to move on from LeBron, who looks like he's going to spend a retirement year in Golden State. We'll get to that in a little bit. But you're going to battle against San Antonio, big, young, strong, physical. Oklahoma City, big, strong, young, physical. Minnesota, same thing. The Lakers, now on that list. And your starting centers are Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes. Where does that leave you? I never thought they were going to be a top 6 playoff team anyway. Does this put them in the area of still being able to be a play-in team? Maybe. This one hurts. I can't spin it any other way. Like I said, great draft capital haul. But the days of the Jazz trading their really good players for draft picks, we thought those were all over. You did that with Rudy. You did that with Donovan. You tried to get value for Conley. Keep going. Royce O'Neal, whatever. You broke that team down to stock your cupboard with an incredible amount of picks and financial flexibility. And this year was supposed to be all speed ahead, all gas, no brakes. That's what this year was supposed to be. And this does change that. It's not doomsday, because one more thing before we catch a break. I also considered this as far as potentially what the Jazz could be thinking now moving forward. There is a chance, and I'm not saying this is the case at all. I'm just thinking out loud here. Ace Bailey is 19 years old. You just draft Darren Peterson, who's 19 years old. You look around the landscape of the league, specifically the West, and you see San Antonio and Oklahoma City. Young, deep, now experienced. OKC has a ring. San Antonio almost did before losing to the Knicks in the finals. I just have to wonder if there's a portion of the Jazz brass, ownership, front office, coaching, whatever, that actually believe their timeline begins with Ace and Darren, who are 19, and will continue to kind of stockpile picks and assets and win some games with Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. and the other young players, Keontae, Filipowski, Sensabaugh. I don't know what Cody Williams is in the NBA yet. Isaiah Collier. Get some of these young players some more experience. Utilize Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Yusuf Nurkic, the vets, to actually start teaching these younger players winning habits instead of intentionally losing for draft capital. And then as Lowry is in his 30s and Jaren Jackson Jr. is in his late 20s, and suddenly you have an Ace Bailey and a Darren Peterson at 22, 23 years old in 3 or 4 years, which is wild to say, they're just so young. Maybe the Jazz have identified that as the time where they feel like their window may open based off of the other peers they have in the Western Conference. I have no idea if that's the deal. I'm just trying to put a more positive spin on a day that just kind of sucks. With all we were expecting to experience this year with the Utah Jazz, today does change that. Porter, I'll give you a crack at this, and then we'll bring in Amy Donaldson. Again, hour away from Tim McMahon. Like I said, that's a lot of draft picks for Walker Kessler. Yep. It just is. But also, we cannot deny that losing Walker, not just for this year, but now moving forward, it sucks. It just does.
I like Walker. I think he's a good basketball fit with not just this Jazz roster, but you can almost plug him in any roster, especially if he continues to kind of expand his jump shot, his offensive game. But when you look at the return the Jazz got for him, and I don't think Walker's an elite center. The Jazz got an elite return for him on the trade market. So I don't think that you can really turn that down if you're the Jazz brass. And you got off of a contract that is going to be really, really big in the next 2 to 3 years. So while I agree with you, I do think that this is a little bit of a bummer very short term. I think it might be a boom for the Jazz long term, of course, if those picks materialize into early first rounders that they hit on. That's all a variable that we don't know about until that day. I'll say I don't think Jackson Hayes or Yusuf Nurkic is necessarily your starting center. I think that there was, and we heard about it a few weeks ago, some Jazz folks talking about how Keontae George and Darren Peterson might play in the backcourt together, or at least that's what they want. That may have been some, now that we look back on it in hindsight, some breadcrumbs to the fact that you now have a Jaren Jackson Jr., a guy who can play 4 and 5, but maybe not who you want. Again, we're looking at Jackson Hayes and Yusuf Nurkic as the other options. When you add the length that you get with a Jaren Jackson, a Lowry Markkanen, an Ace Bailey, a Darren Peterson, I think you can get away with Keontae George being your fifth guy. He's going to have to be the point of the attack defender, while Darren Peterson might be the point of attack offensive point guard. They'll have to figure that out. But I think that's a possibility here. But yeah, like you, I think that this may bring the Jazz ceiling in 2026 down a little bit. But again, if they can go and turn those draft picks into assets that they hit on, it may be a positive for the Jazz long term. And like you said, maybe their calendar is a little bit further out than we thought.
Unprotected first-round picks are very valuable. So many things have to fall into place. The team that traded you the unprotected first-round picks, breaking news, you need them to not be very good at basketball. The Lakers have an ownership group that are willing to write checks to keep this team on a level that, quite frankly, we're always used to them being on anyway. The Jazz own some Cavs picks. The Cavs have been good. They own some Minnesota picks. Minnesota's been good. Like, I get it, hypothetically, to have a bunch of draft capital. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But if the teams whose draft capital you own are winning 50 to 60 games every year, you're drafting in the 20s. So nobody cheers for draft capital. Fans don't cheer for that. They don't cheer for cap space. They cheer for players. And instead of Walker Kessler as your starting center, it will be Yusuf Nurkic, and it might be Jackson Hayes. It will not be Jaren Jackson Jr. He is not a center. All right, Amy Donaldson is going to join us live in studio. Don't forget, 1 hour from right now, Tim McMahon will join us. He's the one that reported the exciting news that Jackson Hayes is moving to Salt Lake. And then Richard Smith. How did this happen? Smitty will walk us through this. Drive on a Wednesday afternoon, off and running. Great to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Walker Kessler lives in Los Angeles now. Jazz offered him a 5-year, $140 million deal. His agents and reps thought it was below market value, and they turned out to be right as the Lakers signed Walker to a 4-year, $130 million deal. So one less year, but more money annually. And in exchange, the Jazz received 4 unprotected first-round picks, which is a lot of unprotected first-round picks for a player that's never made an all-star team and is coming off season-ending surgery. In a vacuum, this is not good. Don't let anybody tell you that it is. If you pan back 30,000 feet, it might be good. That's what unprotected draft picks mean that are down the road. Amy Donaldson, hello. How are you, Amy? Great to see you.
I'm good. I am happy to be not writing. I'm sorry about my voice. I had a tiny bit of a cold. I was almost finished with it, and then I stupidly went running in the pollution/fire ash air. And so this is actually really good. I actually had to be on a podcast last Wednesday.
Okay.
And I wanted to wait and do it another week, but they had a deadline, so.
Got to make deadline. You know that as a writer.
I mean, I said I went from like Stevie Nicks kind of sexy voice to an old man trying to get up the stairs voice.
Oh, so, and there's a difference between those two.
100%. But yeah, that was my voice. So coming back, I'm trying to record for my own podcast. So I'm not talking. So I was like, should I do any more interviews? I don't know. But I had to come see you because there's so much happening.
Yes, and I appreciate you doing this, even though, because I know what it's like to try to force through when your voice isn't great. But this is pretty sizable news. I mean, you know, the days of the Jazz trading their best players for draft picks, we thought those were over.
I thought that was a good point. I think it's just, you're just flying high from, getting the second round pick, getting Darren. I think everything is just going. It just seems like, we might have this little bit of magic, right?
Yep.
And we haven't had magic for a bit, and so everyone was getting super excited. And to have, I think something like this is it's just a little deflating. Like I told you, something in the algorithms must have sensed I needed to hear this from that you were going to talk about this because I got a random podcast clip from a guy who was so thrilled about it. Maybe he's a Laker fan. I don't know.
Yeah,
I just thought it was like the greatest trade ever.
Well, cheering for hypothetical draft picks in 4 years is odd to me. You don't the Lakers have new ownership, and it's the same group that owns the Dodgers. And if you've been paying attention to Major League Baseball, they're going to potentially have a work stoppage because of the incredibly outrageous spending of the Dodgers specifically, who buy everybody and are probably going to win the World Series. It's the same group. And while the NBA structure is different, you can spend money if you want to. It's more punitive in basketball than it is in baseball, but you can still do it if you want to. So if you own the Lakers picks, hypothetically, maybe, but what if they're awesome for the next 10 years because their owners are writing checks and all the picks you own are in the 20s and 30s? You never know how it's going to work out.
For me, it was almost a little PTSD. The center position in Utah has just been like the curse. If we have a curse of the Bambino, our curse is the center, the position, right?
Yeah.
When we had a shot, when we made it, when we were making it to the semifinals and the 2 years in the finals, it was center by committee, right? We've never had a Wemby like center. Our superstar has never been that guy.
Is Mark Eaton the best center we've ever had?
I mean, individually,
All-star? Yeah. Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I would say one of the things I thought of was like,
Rudy. Sorry.
Is it too late to reunite with Rudy Gobert?
Yeah.
As I was driving in and listening to you, and you were depressing the hell out of me, I was like, this is when you...
Wait, I was depressing the hell out of you?
This is when you take your ex back. This is when you call and say, dude, are you lonely? Because we miss you.
Okay.
He liked our mountains.
He did.
Legit. I saw him.
Believe he kept his house.
He has his house.
Yeah.
He liked it here. And he actually hiked. And I'm just saying, I maybe we just dial that number up. But I don't know. It's just I'm not much of a Jazz fan. Let me just say that. My entire family is, living and dying with every move the Jazz make.
Yeah.
But so I've seen too many Jazz games, but but I would say that center position has just vexed the franchise, and they haven't been able to really solve that puzzle. It seemed like Rudy might be the solution.
Yeah.
And then things didn't work out.
Yeah, Rudy was the solution. Best centers of all time Jazz franchise. It's probably Rudy 1, and then it's probably Big Mark 2. There was an Ostertag minute that looked good, and then
Ostertag's a mayor somewhere, maybe.
That's right, Mayor Greg.
But I mean, remember we had it was Alex Carr and Ostertag, and we just had this
Curtis Borchert.
Yeah, we had
Ben Hanlogden.
We had this. It was just center by committee. There wasn't a guy we could count on, right? And so I think that, I just felt like, oh no, here we go again. We're gonna, and I honestly don't think Kessler is Rudy Gobert caliber. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
But what do I know about the NBA?
Yeah, they're relatively similar. I mean, again, the way some media cover some of this stuff in our market, they trade Rudy, Walker comes in as a rookie and plays some really good. And everyone's like, he's actually better than Rudy. It's like, dude, don't say things like that out loud. Rudy Gobert is a Hall of Fame player who's won Defensive Player of the Year 4 times. But when you look at the advanced metrics, the rim protection, the block rate, the rebound rate, Walker is very good. This is a loss in a vacuum. And I think one of the things, and you alluded to it, I'll speak for myself, I'm thinking draft night, you walk away with Darren Peterson, you slot him in with this group, and okay, here we go. But the group was always supposed to be centered around Walker at the pivot because Keontae doesn't guard. If your perimeter players aren't going to play defense, you better have somebody to protect the paint. And it's why that Jazz team with Rudy actually did work with him because Donovan doesn't guard. Royce O'Neal is their best perimeter defensive player. He's 6'3". Yeah. Joe Ingles, I don't even know that he knows how to sprint. I mean, without Rudy Gobert, none of that works. And I'm concerned, even though Jaren Jackson Jr., of course, is a defensive upgrade, I'm just concerned that this plan, at least for right now, has taken a step in the wrong direction when it felt like everything was finally trending forward.
Well, I mean, I think they were between a rock and a hard place. Let's be real.
Yeah.
This wasn't their plan. This wasn't the strategy.
I can't imagine it was.
This was a pivot.
Yeah.
So now they have to earn their money and figure out what to do next. But you're going to see how good a coach Will Hardy is. So...
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, you are.
No, I actually alluded to this earlier because Porter, when we were discussing it, Porter kind of outlined this thing maybe it's a Jaren Jackson Jr., but he's never been a center. Triple J has never been a center. He himself has said he doesn't like playing the position. But if we expand our minds a little bit, does this allow Ace Bailey at 6'9" as your small forward in the starting lineup? And can you survive with Jaren Jackson Jr., and Lauri Markkanen is your 4/5? Because if you're telling me in a Western Conference that has Nikola Jokic and Victor Wembanyama and a bunch of other really, really good bigs that you're going to battle every night with Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes, you are screwed.
Yeah. I don't think that's I don't think this was the plan. I think this was we can't do what we wanted to do, so we got to, it's as they say, it's a detour, an unexpected detour. We'll see what happens. I think it's just, I think for people like my nephew, who's the most rabid Jazz, and he literally texts me every time anything of substance happens.
What's his name?
Eli Corbett.
Shout out, Eli.
He's an airman up at Hill Air Force Base.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So he actually was on duty, so he's going to be pretty sad tonight when he gets off. But yeah, I think that for people who were finally, this is our moment. I think there's been a significant amount of waiting and patience, and I won't say suffering because we don't really know what suffering is in that way, but I think that it's unfortunate. So it's a bummer.
And kind of the trend right now, teams are trying to get bigger because they're looking at Wembanyama and they're seeing what the Knicks were able to do with the combination of Cat and Mitchell Robinson.
I heard you say that, and the thing is, I don't think they're just trying to get bigger. I think bigs are so much more athletic that they cause way more problems than, it's not just having a big tall guy to block the rim. There's so many more things they're able to do, and especially if you watch Wemby in the playoffs at all this year, right? I was just like, good grief, I would never have predicted this is what your center would be doing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that's the trend, is they're bigger, but they're also more athletic, they're more versatile, and how fun, right? If you have one.
Yeah, and I mean, what you want are multiple bodies, again, I think Boston still has Nimi Keita under contract, Utah State kid, but they signed Mitchell Robinson, and the Knicks were able to at least make Wembanyama uncomfortable by throwing, multiple big bodies at him. And, the thing right now in pro basketball is they talk about it being positionless, I should say.
Yeah.
So no point guard, but when you're talking about guarding the other team, positions are real. Positional size and the ability to guard your yard and guard multiple positions and switch and make sure you can guard on the perimeter and protect the rim. That stuff is real.
Yeah.
And without Walker Kessler, they have lost by far their best paint defender. I mean, we can't spin it any other way,
No, I think that's true. The question is, what do you do about it? Because they did not have a choice.
Yeah, you signed Jackson Hayes. That's the solution. Well,
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, before we move on, I haven't talked to you since Darren Peterson had been drafted, and he was introduced to the market on Saturday and was able to sit with Austin Ainge and Ryan Smith afterwards. I'm really impressed with the kid. I think he's going to be really good. So I don't want to be a total Debbie Downer today because of the Walker stuff, because I'm really excited to watch Darren Peterson play basketball.
Oh, I am too. In fact, when the Jazz got the number 2 pick and my nephew and I were debating who they would take, and of course he wanted AJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were a contingent of my family who wanted Cam Boozer, because Carlos Boozer is from Juneau, Alaska.
Yes, he is.
They want to sort of vicariously own him.
Mm-hmm.
But I always liked Darren better.
Yeah.
I thought, for what the Jazz need, the kind of team the Jazz are, I thought I don't know. I just like, especially. I had read about their backgrounds coming out of high school.
Okay.
And I just thought, I think what he faced, what he dealt with, what he learned, I think I kind of like him better.
Yeah.
But I also think I like a not favorite. And I love his attitude about not being picked number 1.
Yeah.
It's going to bug the crap out of him. And he's going to spend his career, hopefully in a positive way, proving everyone wrong.
Yeah.
Because I love that. I love people who figure out a motivation in a disappointment. And that's really the opportunity the Jazz have with the Kessler thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this did not go the way we planned.
And
it's just, I think it hurts for a lot of reasons. The PTSD about the center position. Nobody wants to be here. All this stuff. We're sort of getting over it. Darren's like, no, I wanted to be here. I love you.
Yeah.
And then somebody we were counting on is gone. So I think it's just that same kind of churn and insecurity that we have here. But I think he's a really smart kid. He's very articulate. I'm interested to see what kind of leader he's going to develop into, who he's going to look to. I love seeing, like, once you put him on the court together, put him under some pressure, how are they going to mix? I mean, these are kids who normally we would be watching in college, and that I love watching kids who are the biggest fish in their little pond come together and suddenly be not the biggest fish.
Yeah.
How does that shake out? I think, I'm excited to see. I think he has a ton of potential, and it could go really well. And I can see a couple of ways in which it doesn't go well.
The other thing that sucks is that it's the Lakers.
Yeah, I don't hate the Lakers.
Well, I mean, it's not only that it's the Lakers, it's that another team in the West is now bigger and better, because I was afraid they were going to trade Giannis out here, and Giannis stays east, and luckily Kawhi goes east. Mm-hmm. Will Jaylen Brown come out west? Like, for the Jazz to move up, Amy, there's some teams that have to move down, and then LeBron stuff with LA doesn't work out. It's like, okay, they might be in trouble. Then boom, they snap their fingers and they get probably the best center on the market in Walker. So the Jazz loss is another team in the West gain, which also kind of makes this sting.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's that little brother syndrome too. That's the, LA gets everything. We don't get anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it is. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's times where I don't want them to win because they're LA.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've won. They've had their turn.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know. I don't feel as hopeless. I feel like it was unplanned. I feel like I love to see a challenge and what happened. Like, what's going to happen with this? What's the front office going to do? What's the coach going to do? What are the players going to do? How are they going to spin this? How are they going to make this their moment? Because that's what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, they got to win now.
Yeah.
They got to figure out a way to win.
If he doesn't get healthy, if he's not full strength, you still got to do the same thing. You still have the same situation.
How many of the top 5 Jazz centers of all time do you think you could name in order? We already got the first 2.
You already got the first 2. No, I don't know. None.
Rudy 1.
You have Rudy, Mark Eaton.
Mark Eaton 2. Memo.
How are you defining best center? I guess that would be
A Google search.
Oh, you just
did a Google search.
Okay, gotcha.
Memo 3. Greg Ostertag 4. Shout out Rich Kelly, Dr. Rich Kelly.
There you go.
At 5, who was a big man in New Orleans, then in Utah, 83 to 85. All right, away from the Jazz, are you watching / enjoying the World Cup?
Loving the World Cup. I have my Brazilian foreign exchange student here, and she just about had heart failure. Was it yesterday that Japan and Brazil played?
Oh, I thought you were being serious about a health condition.
No. She was. She brought everybody Brazil gear, and yeah, I said, well, congrats on the win. She said, it was too dicey.
Yeah,
it was. It was definitely. I was impressed with Japan. I watched a game and a half of them in the group play, and I thought they were really good. And the thing about Brazil is it's their game. They're just you could just find rando 11 people in any league. I mean, it's so ingrained in their culture. It's just they expect to win. It's so fun, but it's also so much pressure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I thought that I have loved all the cultural stuff, everyone learning about each other's, the teams picking up other teams. I loved the Mexico. Was it Mexico and South Korea, who were, basically singing each other's songs in their in a mashup of Korean and Spanish.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing I think is really interesting about the World Cup is how you can see, for a coach's book club, it's next week. It's Coach Craven's, and the book
nice.
The book he recommends or that he picked is The Last Innocents. It's about the Dodgers in the '60s and all the social change that's happening in the country and what role Sandy Koufax and Maury Wills play in sort of having, they're sportsmen, they're baseball players, but how they change the league and how they have an impact on social dialogue. And I think that's what I've loved about the World Cup is there's all these conversations about culture and pride and sportsmanship and adversity, and just taking care of each other. It's such a lovely change from what we've been dealing with in sports.
Like Mexico and Ecuador last night in Mexico City.
Oh my God!
These fans are bawling watching their national team.
I'm just going to say that right now.
It was so cool to see these fans crying tears watching their team for the first time in the capital city.
Paraguay when they won, beat Germany in the shootout.
Yeah,
which I was like, that shootout.
Yeah,
I have. That's where I am, and I don't even care.
Yeah,
I'm not. But watching the Paraguayan fans afterwards, I was like grown men sobbing.
Yes,
fans,
it's really cool. Yeah. It's such a fun tournament.
But it just reminds you there's this element of sport, and it's the reason that I think social change can be more effective through sport is because there's this emotional element.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist in other aspects of your life.
Yeah,
it's really fun to watch. And
every single match has a story behind it that you have no frame of reference for. And I do think Fox had done a pretty good job. I like everybody else, Lawless is fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Mm-hmm. But they're like vignettes, their background on these teams. Iraq having to go down to Tijuana. They couldn't train in Arizona.
Iran,
excuse me. And they were accused of trying to smuggle terrorists into the country when clearly they were not doing any of that.
Yeah.
And they had to fly to Tijuana to train instead of being able to train in Arizona and still play some pretty good soccer. I mean, that must have been incredibly challenging. And we could just keep going down the list.
Really, I don't know if you watched Trevor Noah's podcast.
I do not.
But he's got a World Cup, a group of friends.
Oh, okay.
They talk World Cup while it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But he talked about how American, European, North American, European countries don't have to answer for their government's politics, but South American and African countries, these other nations are constantly being asked, like, what do you think of your government's decision to do X? You know? And I thought he's just giving some really interesting commentary that, again, marries this moment of how we talk about ourselves as human beings and how we're just losing ourselves in this joy of sport and competition. So, and I don't know about you, but I'm trying to remember which forward it was that kicked a goal across his body. I mean, like, I have seen athletic feats that I'm just like, how is this happening this many times?
Was it France?
No,
the France
it
goal.
wasn't France. It was Kane. I think it was Kane.
Harry Kane, England.
Harry Kane from England.
God save the Queen.
Yeah, because he scored 2 and they won, and it was dicey. It was I think it might have been an extra time.
Yeah, 2-1. I think he scored 2 goals in the final 11 minutes to beat the Congo, right? England. Yeah. England. Yeah, Harry Kane.
And that goalie's had an amazing tournament.
Yeah.
But so you've watched a quarterback throw across his body across the field, which is never advised by any coach ever. Mm-hmm. But he did that with a kick that I was like, if he didn't strain something, I don't know. I mean, it was the most ridiculous cross-body kick I've ever seen. Yeah. And it was perfectly placed. And, again, I see so many. I think, oh, this is it. This is my favorite. And then, 2 hours later, we're watching something else. Yeah. I go, oh, man, this is it. This is it. But I am on the Mexico bandwagon. Okay. I love their jerseys. Yeah. And I just think they've been playing. They're so fun to watch. Yeah. No, it's been really cool. And the fact that our president he won the FIFA Peace Prize. Yeah, that didn't even register for me. Amy. Yeah. It wasn't a real thing until this year. All right, before we catch a break, let me just update you. So when it comes to Gobert, Mitchell, and now Walker Kessler, those 3 deals, okay, so far it's Brad Larry Marketing, Yusuf Nurkic, 9 first-round picks, 5 first-round swaps, and a ton of second-round picks. They've used 2 Minnesota picks. One was on Keontae, so that, of course, is a win. The other was on Walt Clayton Jr., who they used in the Jaren Jackson Jr. deal. They still have a 2027 and a 2029 Minnesota pick, a 2027 and a 2029 Cleveland pick, now a 2031 and a 2033 Laker pick, 2 swaps from Cleveland, 2 swaps from LA. That's 9 first-round picks they still have at their disposal to add talent and utilize deals. So if I could underscore your point, while losing Walker in a vacuum hurts, there's no other way around that. You can still look to the future as some things that a very smart front office has at their disposal to add talent. Yeah, they don't. The cupboards are not bare, as they say. No, they're not. An analogy I hate, but yeah. All right, we're going to catch a break. Amy is going to do one more segment. I can tell that her voice is tired, but we're going to have her sit with us for one more segment. Are we going to talk WNBA? We're going to talk WNBA, and we're going to talk about what you're doing right now. Don't forget, Tim McMahon will stop by coming up in a bit. Smitty's going to be live in studio during the 4 o'clock hour. I want to let you know that you can make it a summer of live at Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater. Get 4 lawn tickets for just $99 and see Caliucas on August 5th, the Black Crows and Whiskey Myers on August 13th. And then the show Porter will be at Train with Bare Naked Ladies on August 19th. Visit livenation.com/Summer of Live for tickets. More with Amy coming up next on ESPN 700.
Amy Donaldson is live in studio for one more segment. Tim McMahon is going to join us coming up at 3:30, so about 25 minutes from right now. Walker Kessler lives in Los Angeles. Mitchell Robinson is going to the Celtics. A ton of NBA offseason. The Jazz have signed Jackson Hayes to try to step in and provide another big body along with Yusuf Nurkic. But Amy, you're always good to, like, the way Caitlin Clark is covered, I find really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have all of these different factions of people that believe, like, no, the WNBA owes everything to Caitlin Clark. And then it's like, no, the WNBA had all of their bricks kind of laid far before Caitlin Clark was even born. And then you have people yelling at each other, and you have Alyssa Thomas fouling her, right? And then she was suspended, and then people are mad at her, and then Caitlin Clark wasn't on a WNBA poster, and it's like, well, hold on, her name, image, and likeness. Well, Caitlin Clark's name, image, and likeness is owned by Nike. She couldn't.
Yeah,
this
but
was
why
not.
is the league not cognizant of that? Why isn't the league working with companies? Like, if you're gonna do a league, this is my problem. First of all, the league is the problem. But go ahead.
But I felt like Caitlin was getting all this crap for, like, not being on the poster, and it was not her fault.
Well, it wasn't her. I think the league got the crap, but the league deserved the crap because they decided to do this 30th anniversary poster, and they don't. There's a few really key players not on there. I want to say Cynthia Cooper's not on there either, but Diana Taurasi, arguably, my opinion, one of the, like, if there's a spine of the WNBA, it's her, and she's not on there because of this, for the same licensing issues. How does the league do this and not figure those issues out? Like, it doesn't make sense. There are ways around this. Every other league deals with it, and no one would do this. No, the NBA is not making a 30th or 40th anniversary, whatever, without the best players.
Was it because they didn't want to pay for it?
I'm assuming that's what it is. But also, it's just crappy leadership. I think here's the thing. In women's sports, and I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of holdover leadership in this from this school of thought, from this way of thinking. That is that, like, we don't have to be as excellent. We don't have to. The bar is what we set it at, right? And so, I think the leadership at the top of the WNBA has been terrible, and that's why the officiating is bad, and it's been bad. But now the problem you have is people who have never watched the WNBA until Caitlin Clark entered the picture. They are like, wait, what is happening here? Why do you have this? Here's the thing that always happens. You cover women's sports, you get used to the universe in which you're operating. You get used to the rules. You get used to this. There was a really interesting culture that existed there, and it was unlike any other league. It's sort of like when I did the podcast on RSL. Soccer has its own, energy and culture and identity that's separate from any other sport. And I think the WNBA is just a really unique league. And there are a lot of other, like, somebody on a different podcast a week ago asked me, why didn't the WNBA work in Utah? And I said, that's a long conversation, which I would have, but I won't have it unless we can really have fully air what I think are the reasons. But because it's not just about, women's sports not getting the right financial investment. That's part of it. But what's happening with Caitlin Clark is you have a collision of a number of things, and it requires nuance, and it requires people not to look for a villain and not to be as judgmental as they always are in this moment in time. And people just can't do it. So there's been a really great column, Sarah Sohai, I sent it to you, from The Ringer. She was actually on PBS Tonight or whatever their nightly thing is. And I've seen a couple of interviews with her, but I read her column. Hers was the first column that I've read that actually sort of took some of these threads and wove them together. And basically it's like, hey, there were a lot of things at play. There was a terrible call, a missed call that should have been called, and that needs to be addressed. There's the issue that this league was built on the backs of gay and queer women, queer and black women, and women of color, and that culture exists separate and apart from, regular sports fans, which are a lot of straight white dudes. Okay, outside of the WNBA. So Caitlin Clark is a straight white woman. She comes into the league. She brings those fans with her, right? Did she give them a financial boost and in every way? She's widened their audience. She's changed the league in a lot of ways. And some people are afraid of that. Some people in the league are saying, hey, we've seen this before. We've created this really beautiful thing that we really love, and now people are going to come in and change it. They're going to take over. They're going to say we have to do things differently. They're going to impose their will on us rather than this league has grown from the ground up, right? And that's what people are afraid of. The NBA started this thing, but they haven't really paid attention. It's just grown wild in the backyard, and now it's this thing that they see a lot more potential in, and they want to get a piece of the action. So you have a lot of things at play. Bad officiating that needs to be dealt with. Bad leadership at the top of the WNBA, which honestly, she just needs to be. They need a replacement at the top.
The new commissioner, or Kathy Engelbert.
Yeah, she's bad in every sense. I mean, I don't know. She just is not the person for the moment, right? This is a crossroads for the league. They have this opportunity to expand their audience, to expand and grow their culture in a way that's really positive. They have a chance to do a lot of things for other women's sports. But this is a league that's had a very clear identity, and now that identity is being shifted, and it's got to evolve, and it requires like thoughtfulness and nuance and intelligence and care, not racist insults at a woman for fouling or being accused of being MAGA because you're straight and white. I mean, there's too many black and white views on and they're coming from white dudes who've never watched the WNBA until Caitlin Clark entered it. They don't know what they're talking about, and I would like to shut them all up.
I want you to continue to kind of explain this because I have the piece up that you sent me. Life inside the WNBA, for the most part, is genuinely awesome, but outside the arena, the league is filtered through two polarized narratives, both of them unflattering. Number one, the league is stacked against Caitlin Clark. Players resent her, referees won't protect her, and league leadership has been reluctant to acknowledge obvious mistreatment. And number two is the league is a hotbed of racism, homophobia, and misogyny.
Yes.
Those are the two sides you're discussing?
Yep. And I think they could both come from fear, right? So people who haven't ever watched women's basketball, and this actually was a thing that bothered me at first. So Caitlin Clark enters the picture, her last year in college, and it's this awesome moment on one hand, and on the other hand, all these people who've done nothing but ignore or malign women's basketball are suddenly now experts in women's basketball. And I almost lost my mind, but I thought, you know what? Some attention. You and I talked about it. The tension, there's no, as my husband says, no bad attention, right? So I figure we'll be able to alchemize this. We will talk about this. We will bring them into the fold. We will educate them about women's basketball. That hasn't happened, right? They just do what they do. They think what they think, and we're not changing them. But they also don't know what they're talking about. And they probably don't know what they're talking about on a lot of fronts, but definitely when it comes to women's basketball. But if you follow people who covered women's basketball before Caitlin Clark came into the league, then you will get a different view of this. You will get a more nuanced view of it. Because Caitlin Clark did come in and she did suck up a lot of oxygen in the room. And there were women who were A, jealous of it, and women who were B, afraid of it. Because what I've been told by, and this is where we'll get into a little bit of race discussion, by many black women, that they would trust a white man over a white woman. Because who benefited more from affirmative action? The single biggest benefactor from affirmative action wasn't people of color. It was white women, because they were considered a minority. But white women are adjacent to power, and so they have the best of both worlds, right, to take advantage of. So they can come into the league and say, no, we're just like you, but they take over the culture, and the culture is not predominantly white. It's what I love about it. It's like going to the World Cup, where your culture might not even be, you might not even see it. You know what I mean? You're going to have to learn how other people do things. You're going to have to understand the way other people think. And I love that. I think it's fascinating. That's why I love traveling. But that's basically the WNBA is its own little crucible of life. And it's always been a very, a forward-thinking league, very progressive league, justice-minded, I mean, after the George Floyd incident, after he was killed, the WNBA was the first league. Same thing after the Mike Brown shooting. They were the first professional athletes to take a stand and they did it across the board. Like there wasn't like any hesitation. There wasn't like one person was on their knees or a couple people. Like they whatever they did, it was universally there wasn't a lot of discussion. Now there has to be discussion because there's diversity in the league, which is what you want, and there's diversity in the fan base, which is what you want. But at this moment in time, we're not that good at discussing things without taking it personally and being jerks. And so Alyssa Thomas is getting a bunch of death threats and being called a bunch of racist names, and the league does very little to protect players. They're not protecting Caitlin Clark on the court, but also listen to Gino Ariema, legendary UConn coach, who will tell you, hey, she gives it as good as she gets it, right?
Yeah.
She's no victim here. She is not built like some of the players she's going up against, so she might need to, if she wants longevity, she might need to change that up. But there's a lot of really good analysis, but it's all, people are using the analysis that's out there from the people who've been in the league or been in women's basketball as weapons. Like, here, see, he says this, so we're right. She's the bad guy. Here, look at this. I found this person's comment, and they've been in the league for 20 years, so they're racist, right? It's not one thing. And I think for people who are true fans of women's basketball, this is exhausting because most of the chaos is happening in and among people who affect the league but are not in the league. Mm-hmm. They're not true fans. They're not, people who've been living and dying with this league for 30 years. So here we come to this really amazing milestone, 30 years. More fans than ever. The league's expanding. The women, they finally get paid, right? And they think to pay the people who built this league. And then you just have all of this just mismanagement and mishandling, and the media, which is 90% white and male, doesn't care. So why wouldn't they just have a hot take?
I do think a lot of this is not unlike other areas of media coverage and the way people consume things, where you just see a snapshot video on your Instagram feed of Caitlin getting fouled, and that's all you react to.
Yeah, and in this case, there's a picture that froze this moment.
Right.
She fell, yeah.
And, if you watch the whole game, as Gino would say, you're going to see Caitlin throwing elbows. You're going to see Caitlin, playing physical basketball.
And
but
you're going to see Caitlin complaining. That's the people who don't like Caitlin.
But if you only see 1 2-second video of a large African American woman punching a small white woman in the throat, suddenly you're going to react to it in the way that you're kind of conditioned to react to such things.
Yeah.
I'm just saying whoever.
If you're a black person,
no,
you're not
I wasn't. I
but
wasn't saying one side or the other. I'm saying whoever you are, you're going to react to that video in the way that you're conditioned to, instead of watching the entire game to see exactly how it's played out.
So media controls the commentary, right? They control the discussion around the game. I mean, there are social media, and social media is basically a cesspool, but at least the thing about the WNBA and women's basketball in general is social media has always played a really vital role in them telling their stories because the traditional media has not covered them. So them being advocates for themselves and telling their own stories has always been part of the league, right? And that's what they're continuing to do. Now that's been hijacked to some degree because there's so many people who aren't in this universe. I mean, like, I have a friend who's a longtime women's basketball fan, right? He told me, he's followed the Stars, left here and went to Texas, and then they're the Aces in Las Vegas. He's been a fan the entire time. He said he's had to drop out of some of the fan groups online because they've become so toxic.
What do they say?
They bring in...
Is it back to one of the two camps?
They bring in what you just said, right?
Yeah.
I saw this, and this is what I know to be
Yeah,
true,
okay.
right? And it's because she supports this candidate, or it's because she's attractive, or it's because she's not gay. And it always... There's always a good guy and a bad guy. There's no nuance, right?
Yeah.
It's not complicated to them. And nobody ever brings with... There are people who are trying to have that conversation there, but they just get hammered by these people who are new to the scene and just really want to argue with somebody. I shared this video on my social media, and I highly recommend. Trevor Noah did a conversation. He does a podcast with his buddy. I think it's called What Now? and with Brene Brown. And they talk about groupthink and how Trevor said when he first started doing The Daily Show, people would just send him like the most horrific, they would make all these terrible comments to him, and they would have this debate about how he was never going to make it, and he's not funny, and he can't even speak English, and da-da-da. And one of them, who was particularly mean, he reached out to the guy and said, hey, why do you hate me so much? And he's like, hey, Trevor, what's up, man? I don't hate you.
It's usually how it goes.
Yeah, and, you've been the subject, too. Like,
oh, yeah.
I've had, I've shown some of my colleagues things I get, and they're, just horrified.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? So... And then you talk to them, you try to talk to them, and then they're just like, oh no, I was having fun. And basically he said, this is just what we do for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this jumping on the bandwagon. You get a dopamine hit with this mob mentality. And I think what's at play here, especially on online groups, is the mob mentality.
Yeah.
But what's at play out in the mainstream media is a lot of commentators. I mean, every dude has a podcast, it seems like, every former athlete, whatever. And also, most of the media they've never covered the league.
Yeah.
And so they're having these conversations. And I think we should be having conversations, but have somebody on your show who actually covered women's basketball. Bring on somebody. You wouldn't want to talk about some, a hockey issue that, this sport is at a crossroads and, you're not sure what's going to happen here, whatever. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't have that conversation with somebody who never covered the league.
Right.
They have to have, or they played in the league. They have some connection to what you're talking about. And that's, I think my frustration is listening to three men that I know have probably watched a combined 2 women's basketball games, talking about why this is happening and how women are just catty and mean, and they need to appreciate what Caitlin Clark brings to the table. And the women who are there, if there was jealousy, if there was bad blood, that's just they're just see what I told you? We're nothing without this white lady.
Well, see, here's the thing that kind of grinds my gears with that. I watched Michael Jordan get his head kicked in for 3 or 4 years by the Pistons and the Celtics before he figured it out. And I don't think it's because the white Celtics were jealous of a young black player. I think everybody was terrified that, wait, he's awesome. We've never seen this before, and we have to play the Jordan rules. The Pistons, no layups. Jordan comes into the lane, we take his head off. So if you strip away the whole she's a white straight girl and these are gay black women narrative and just apply it to sports, this happens. A really good young player comes into the league, and the other players, whether it's jealousy, whether it's they're threatened, or whether it's she's just awesome or he's just awesome, it's not uncommon for these players to have to earn their stripes from the veteran players they're playing against.
Which is what a guy like Gino Ariam is saying.
Right.
This is what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's hard because it is really hard, I will say, to strip that stuff away because that is so much. Women's sports just doesn't have the luxury of. I mean, did you ever see or read the book about We Are Marshall?
Didn't they make a movie?
They made a movie.
I think I watched the movie.
It's based on the book.
Yeah.
There's a plane crash and most of the team dies, right?
Yeah.
And the coach. And I remember in that book he says, somebody says that they're getting this is why the NCAA changed their rule and let freshmen play varsity football, was because of the Marshall plane crash. But at one point, they're getting annihilated every time they go out and play football. And one of the assistant coaches says to the guy who's now the head coach, how are we honoring the people we lost by getting destroyed on the field? How is this good? How is this anything anybody should be proud of? And he gives this amazing speech. It's in the movie, also in the book in a much longer form. But he basically says, we are because we're not quitting. Because that's what we do, right? That's what brought us together, and that's what's going to get us through this. And it will hurt, and it will feel bad, and we'll feel bad that we can't win for them until the only thing we care about someday we'll wake up, and all we care about is winning. Mm-hmm. And when that day comes, we'll know we healed ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how I feel. Men's sports has gotten to this place because of the time that they've been able to play, the length of history they have behind them, where you can just say it's about X's and O's, or I don't think sports ever is that, but it's more so for men. For women's sports, it's so young that it's really hard to not have it be about have it be socially important.
But I
or,
thought that's
you know,
what I thought was that's the problem you have
that's
with the
the
conversations.
goal. No. I think that's my problem is the ignorance that ignores or that is uninformed about that.
Uninformed about the social issues.
About the social dynamics.
Yeah, got it.
Because it's not just a young player coming in and taking their licks, right? Like that, we've all seen that.
So is it jealousy then? I mean, what is it?
The jealousy is. I wouldn't assume to know what's inside all of the minds
Sure.
of the people who are, who don't like her, like who think they don't like her because
Mm-hmm.
probably they don't know her. But I think there are players who are afraid that her coming in and sucking up so much oxygen and taking up so much attention and that's going to change the league
Mm-hmm.
in a way that leaves them out. These are people who have been marginalized in society for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so they found their place, whether they're fans or they're players or coaches. They found their place in the WNBA.
And they don't want it to change.
And they don't want it to change.
But
And
isn't the goal for it to change and grow?
it has to change. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's a non-negotiable.
Okay.
Nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
So but what a good leader at the top of the league
Back to the commission, yeah.
would say is, look, I understand you're afraid, and I understand you don't know the history of this place, but we can navigate this crossroads together.
I see,
because
yeah.
This is every league. Everyone's had to do this.
Yeah.
Anybody who's grown larger, gotten bigger. Like I said, the book that we read with Coach Cravens, The Last Innocents. One of the opening scenes is Sandy Koufax, a Jewish pitcher, talking. Him and Maury Wills, the black infielder, they trade mail. They don't read their own hate mail. They read each other's hate mail, and then they say to each other, "Oh, Sandy, you don't want to read what this guy's saying.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
this guy is talking about your wife. I think you should throw this one straight in the trash."
Interesting. Yeah.
And they kind of just it does two things, right? Like it makes you feel like it's not personal. Like it's that online thing. It's that group mentality. Like I need somebody to hate, and you're in the way, right?
Yep.
And then it's also this idea that like someone else understands what it feels like to sort of be teetering on the edge of being accepted. I mean, belonging and connection is really why we love sports.
Yeah.
We talked about the World Cup.
Mhm.
What we love about this is it is connecting us to each other in a completely different way, in a visceral way, in an emotional way, not just about like, did your team win or what were the stats of that game?
Yeah.
But that's what's missing. If you had leadership who understood the chatter that's happening, that wants it to just be X's and O's, wants it to just be like, hey, this young player's coming and taking our legs, or these women are just jealous, right? Understands that there's a lot more nuance happening there.
Yeah.
You could navigate this with a lot less pain.
Amy, where can people go find all of the things you are currently doing, and tell us about all of the things you are currently doing?
Well, Coach's Book Club, it's on the KSL Sports YouTube page, or you can listen on any of the podcast apps, and then you can follow me on if I share some of these articles.
Yeah.
I don't say a bunch, and I don't feel like I'm an expert enough to be writing commentary on this, but there are some really good, insightful, nuanced pieces out there that'll help you understand what good leadership could actually do for this league,
Yeah.
and help both Caitlin Clark, who I feel bad for her because I think she becomes a lightning rod, and she never signed up for that.
Right.
She's wanted to come in and play basketball.
Yeah.
And that's and as all the women did.
Yeah.
But I think that I think until they figure out the leadership piece, we're all going to be like, oh no, not again.
Great to see you. Thanks for helping us understand things that we're not all that familiar with. We always appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys. And I love listening, and I'm glad you're in a, see, I took you out of your bad mood.
Yeah, no, I'm less
I think
depressed.
your next guest might put you back in it, though.
Yeah, Tim McMahon, who's been reporting on the Walker Kessler News for 2 years, is our next guest. Richard Smith, 4 o'clock hour. And then we'll get to the 5 and say goodnight at 6 on a Wednesday show on ESPN 700. I don't know how long Tim McMahon has been coming on this radio show, gently alluding to some pieces of information regarding Walker Kessler, who may have wanted to play elsewhere. But what a day to have Tim McMahon on the radio show, as Walker Kessler now lives in Los Angeles, California. What's up, Tim? How are you, man?
Howdy, partner, and adios to the sheriff.
Indeed.
Walker Kessler is gone.
Indeed.
Draft picks are arriving.
All right, walk us through this. How did this go down? What should Jazz fans know about this entire situation and how it unfolded?
I mean, just we've kind of gone over the disagreement and the tension between Walker's reps and the Jazz front office over the last year or so. Essentially came down to this. Walker Kessler clearly wanted to play for the Los Angeles Lakers, especially because he felt like he was getting lowballed by the Utah Jazz. Now, the people I talked to around the league felt like the Jazz's offer was more than fair. However, they were able to get a larger offer from the Lakers, an offer richer than the Jazz wanted to match. They obviously huffed and puffed about intending to match anything, but there was a threshold. And then once it reached that threshold, and they were willing to get really a pretty big haul of picks. I mean, more than the Clippers got for trading Kawhi Leonard off of an All-NBA season. Then the Jazz pounced on it. 2 unprotected picks, a couple of swaps. I tend to doubt that the 28 swap will have value, but we'll see. And that's really the long and short of it. But it leaves a void at the center position, or at least a starting center spot for the Jazz. But really, it was a significant long-term value add for Utah. And, the Lakers got put in a situation because they basically looked Luka Doncic in the eye and promised that this summer they would have cap space. They would deliver a legitimate big that he'd been begging for, just as he begged the Mavericks for years before they finally went out and got a couple bigs for him. And so the Lakers could not go back and look Luka in the eye and say, sorry, we whiffed on our one chance to have cap space. We didn't deliver a big man. So, this was a Lakers team that was acting with a sense of desperation.
All right, so on the scale of the Jazz thought that the Lakers' offer sheet was too rich for them to match on one side, and Walker and his reps maybe telling the Jazz, like, look, he just wants to be in L.A. This isn't necessarily about a different sheet. This is about him wanting to play for another team. Balance that scale out for me, Tim.
I mean, it's all part of the equation here. And I think the Jazz were willing to play hardball unless it made sense for them to take an offer. So, if this is an offer sheet, then I think the Jazz take their sweet time in considering whether they should match it or not. I think they basically take their time and decide whether what they would deem an overpay for Walker Kessler would be worth it instead of losing him for nothing. But when you threw 2 unprotected picks and a couple of swaps into the equation, it didn't take them long, obviously, to act on it.
Okay, so look, let's move over to the space of what it means for the Jazz right now, because I had Austin Ainge and Ryan Smith on the show, and whether it's Austin or Ryan or Danny or Zanuck or Will, they have all talked about the immediate plan for this season and the long-term plan, including Walker Kessler. When do you think, this was yesterday, they said Walker was part of the plan. When do you think the Jazz started to get the idea that this was actually something that was on the table, that they would have to maybe execute a sign and trade when Walker wanted to go? When do you think they first had that inclination?
I think they were pretty skeptical that the Lakers were actually going to put a number like that on the table. So I think when they heard, okay, that's a legit offer from the Lakers, that changed the equation. That's when things change. But yeah, I mean, all my intel was Walker wanted to go to L.A., but the Jazz intended to keep him until obviously things changed.
All right, so Yusuf Nurkic, 2 years, $22 million. And as I've been saying, Nurk played well for the Jazz last year when Walker went down. Obviously, you still want Walker Kessler. And then they bring in Jackson Hayes as a secondary option. Do you think there's anything as far as maybe Will Hardy and the Jazz coaching staff looking at a lineup where Jaren Jackson Jr., who has not historically liked playing the 5, nor is he a 5, but maybe Will thinks he can be that as long as Ace Bailey and Lauri Markkanen provide some size and length on the perimeter? Or do you think the Jazz starting center this year will be Yusuf Nurkic and their backup will be Jackson Hayes?
I anticipate that it's going to be the Thunder and Lightning combo of Nurkic and Hayes.
Oh, don't do that.
Now, by the way, I stole Thunder and Lightning. I didn't come up with that. That
okay.
was stole that from somebody within the building.
Okay.
But look, they've got two capable backup centers, and they're going to have a tag team. Now, will Jaren probably play the 5 at some points? Yes, but he's not. It's not that he doesn't like playing the 5. It's that he doesn't do it well.
Right.
He's a great shot blocker. He's a poor rebounder for a 5, and that's a problem. Like Team USA played him at the 5 and finished 7th in the World Cup. He's not a 5. He's not a center. If you'd have gotten a guy like Cameron Boozer, who's a really strong rebounding power forward, then I think you could have gotten away with playing Jaren some significant minutes at the 5, because then he would have masked Boozer's biggest weakness, which is obviously the rim protection part of things, and Boozer would have masked Jaren's biggest weakness, which is the rebounding. But you got Darren Peterson, who they obviously felt like had a bigger upside, and they don't have a long-term solution at center now. They do have a lot of draft capital. I anticipate there will be some point that they will cash in some of that draft capital, maybe even one or two of the picks that they just got from the Lakers to go get a big. At what point that is, I don't know. I really don't.
I wondered aloud earlier in the show, and I'm just kind of stretching to discuss possibilities here, because as you referenced, there are two things that I believe are true about this transaction. It really sucks to lose Walker after developing him and watching him turn into one of the elite rim protectors and rebounders, and a guy with a big body you can throw at Jokic and Wembanyama. Like, that sucks, there's no doubt. And also, holy smokes, how many draft picks? Like, that's also true, okay? But as far as what it means for this season, does it change what our expectations should be pertaining to who they are in the West now?
I honestly think the expectations were starting to get too high regardless.
Agreed.
Like, this idea that the Jazz were going to go from 22 wins to 50 wins, it was pretty silly to me. And what did they win 22 last year? Was that a year?
Correct. 22 last year, yeah.
Okay. So I think that people were starting to get a little bit over their skis on Jazz expectations. But, yeah, this absolutely lowers the ceiling. I don't know. I thought that a successful season for the Jazz next year with Walker in the mix would be getting into the play-in. At this point, I think that probably would be overachieving. But, look, there's still reason to be excited about next season. Obviously, you get Darren Peterson, who, they think has star potential. They still think Ace has star potential. We'll see what Jaren and Lauri look like as a, kind of a supersized forward tandem. See if Keontae can build on what he did last season, if that can be a springboard type of season for him. But there's a hole. Yusuf Nurkic is a quality backup center. He's not a starting caliber center. Jackson Hayes is a quality kind of change of pace, bench option. He's not a starting center. They don't have a starting center on the roster. At some point, they're going to have to fix that. I don't anticipate that it's going to be before the season. That's for sure.
One of the other, and I'm throwing darts again against a dartboard, see if one of them sticks. Darren Peterson is 19. Ace Bailey is 19. I just wonder if they look at OKC, San Antonio, good young teams in the West, and maybe there's a thought process in the organization like, no, our window starts with these two young players who we both think are stars. So, let's continue to get a bunch of draft capital. They got 4 more picks. They still have picks coming from Cleveland. They still have picks coming from Minnesota. And, still playing this long game deal that Jazz fans don't want to hear about. But maybe there's something there where they like their two teenagers and they're just going to continue to build this thing up slowly and slowly and slowly. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's an alteration of what the plan was.
Sure.
Now the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade was, that basically set a firm timeline of the tanking is over. We want to be competitive. That did not set a timeline of we think we've arrived. There's a big difference between those two. So, again, this is certainly a setback for next season. They're not going to be as good next season as they would have been if Walker Kessler was on the roster. But I don't necessarily think this is like a situation where, oh, my gosh, we better reassess what the entire plan was, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And again, I just want to be clear. The 4 unprotected draft picks for Walker Kessler, 2 of them are swaps, but that's a big-time haul for the Angels once again. What does this mean for the Lakers? Where do you think the Lakers exist in the West ecosystem now?
It's interesting because really the Lakers have pushed all their chips in at this point. Like, they don't have control over their own draft pick. I think they still have control of 2032, and that's it over the next 7 years. But they don't have any other picks to trade now over the next 7 years. They're not going to have any, like, a consistent influx of young talent. And I don't think they're good enough to contend in the Western Conference. Like, I don't think they're on the same level as San Antonio and Oklahoma City. And look, man, Walker, his agents at CA, they believe he's one of the best big men in the league. For the Lakers' sake, they better be right, because there will be a lot on his plate. Not on the offensive end necessarily. Like, he's going to get spoon-fed a bunch of dunks. He's going to run pick and roll with Luka and catch lobs, and he's a great offensive rebounder. He's going to clean up off of Luka and Austin Reeves when they drive and aren't able to finish, and he's going to put up some nice numbers. He'll have a jump in offensive production. He has to be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate every single year, because they are a bad perimeter defensive team. And we saw Rudy Gobert was able to fix or hide a lot of flaws for the Jazz for years. They need Kessler to be that guy, because they were bad as a perimeter defensive team last year and managed to get worse.
Well, and the Jazz better hope that Darren Peterson is as good as advertised defensively, Tim, because my understanding of the plan and the way it was explained to me is, look, we all know that Keontae took a jump last year. He took a jump as a bucket getter and an offensive player and took 0 jumps on the other end of the floor. So if you're going to play Keontae George, then you're going to have somebody behind him to protect the rim. And I thought they were planning that to be Walker. The same way he is going to have to be that for the Lakers, he was going to have to be that for the Jazz, and I don't see the answer on the roster right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Like I said, the Jazz, I don't know who their center of the future is. They don't know who their center of the future is. The best thing I can tell you about that is they do have ammo to go out and get one in the trade market once they find a guy to target. But Keontae's got to get better defensively. Now, they do think both Ace and Peterson have elite two-way potential. And look, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a hell of a rim protector.
Yeah.
He's just not a 5.
Right.
But he'll clean some things up for sure.
So when it comes to when we were trying to discuss teams with cap space, we kept talking about the Lakers, and we would say, well, if it breaks down with LeBron, they could be in the mix. How intentional do you think this was with the Lakers potentially targeting Walker and just deciding, like, all right, LeBron, you go do your thing. We think we have a chance to get this kid anyway.
Yeah, look, I think the LeBron thing, the Lakers decided they were done with him, and I compared it the other day to one of my middle school sons who wants to break up with his girlfriend, but it's awkward, so he doesn't want to be the one to dump her, so he hopes she dumps him. And LeBron ended up dumping them, and I think there was a mutual decision that it was time to go their separate ways, for the simple fact that they had to use the cap space to upgrade the supporting cast around Luka for the long term. LeBron obviously is the epitome of a short-term solution at this point. And, this is their one swing with cap space because Austin Reeves' contract's going to be on the books moving forward.
I want a podcast where it's just you giving your sons advice on romance, Tim. That's all I want to hear at this point.
Oh, dude, they get so sick of me asking about babes. They won't talk to me about girls. It's, and I tell them, I'm like, dude, your mom is fine. I mean, I've done pretty well. You might want to listen to me.
There you go. All right, before I set you loose, where do you think LeBron plays next year, and do you think it's his final year?
Let me just frame this as pure speculation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, what I hope happens, I hope that he goes back to Cleveland. I hope he has a reunion there, coming home for the final time, kind of the storybook ending. I hope it's a reunion/retirement tour. It would be weird to see him in a Warriors uniform. Let's just be honest.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. All right, buddy, we'll set you loose. Thanks for the time, and you've been right about this the whole time, so always listen to Tim McMahon. Thanks, dude.
Well, I did think yesterday that Walker would end up staying in Utah, but other than that, I was right on the money.
There you go. Fair enough. Fair enough. Tim McMahon covers the NBA for ESPN, covers the Utah Jazz like ESPN as well. And, Porter, we were kicking this around earlier. I feel like it's 2 years. I feel like for 2 years, Tim has been coming on this show and sounding a little bit of an alarm about some sort of disconnect between Walker Kessler, his people, and the Utah Jazz. So the question I asked him, because look, the Jazz offered Walker Kessler 5 years, $140 million. And I thought and still think that's fair. The Lakers did offer Walker more annual money, 4 years, so one less year, but 130, so only $10 million less. So essentially, we're looking at roughly, $17, $18 million more than the Jazz were offering. So the Lakers did offer more than the Jazz were offering, but I still don't think this is simply about not wanting to match the sheet. There has to be more there. There has to have been a message sent from Walker's camp that, yes, we got the sheet that you didn't think we were going to get, but also, look, he just wants to be in L.A. Because I think if it was just up to the Jazz and there was no other option, they would have matched him. So the combination of the offer sheet and potentially the disconnect between Walker and the Utah Jazz, how much of it do you think was the offer sheet, and how much of it do you think was him wanting to live in Los Angeles? Are you tuned in here? You got stuff going on? I can handle this side if you're busy doing the thing.
No, you're good.
So, offer sheet, Walker wanting out. I mean, it's obviously both.
Right.
But it's so weird to me that for the past number of months, Austin, Danny, Zanuck, Will, they've all talked about Walker as part of the plan, and now he lives in Los Angeles. It's wild to me.
And we talked about this before we came on air, how seemingly done it was before it was done, if that makes sense, right? Walker flying to L.A., having a meeting. We saw the weird TMZ, follow the guy in the airport and ask him awkward questions. And Walker was like, I'm here. I am here, right? He very much said that part. It does seem like whether it was a year ago, whether it was a month ago, it does seem like there was a decision made, whether it was with Walker or in tandem, that he was headed elsewhere and would likely be to team up with Luka and the Los Angeles Lakers. I think he's still dating Miss USA, too. She's a little Hollywood.
Shout out to her. I thought she was like a local girl.
I'm not sure, but
now I have to look it up.
When you're Miss USA, I'm sure Los Angeles presents some opportunities that Midvale doesn't.
Abby Stockard is her name.
I don't think she's local, but...
No, she's not. He met her at Auburn. So wait a second. Porter Larson is reporting that Abby Stockard, wanting to be an influencer, is behind Walker Kessler moving to L.A.
No, just an additional piece of context on what we know is a life and business decision, right? These are basketball decisions. but they're also more than that when we zero in on these people being, not basketball robots, but people off the floor.
Aren't there like a ton of Utah influencers? I feel like our
yeah.
state is stacked with like young women who never want to work and just want to post things on their Instagram so they can become Insta famous.
To be clear, yes. If you want to just be like an Instagram famous person and look good on the internet and make a bunch of money doing it, Utah's fine. It's just not LA.
Those people make horrible life partners, by the way. Just a little piece of advice. Miss America 2025, Miss Alabama 2024. Can you confirm or deny that they are currently still in a relationship? Because I have no idea.
I don't think I can.
Okay.
But I can.
To check your sources.
I can check some sources.
How awkward was it hearing Tim McMahon say, "My sons don't want me to talk about the babes"? You shouldn't be asking your middle school kids about babes anyway, Tim. It's very Dave Fox-ish there.
That's our guy.
Did Belgium just score 2 goals in like 5 minutes?
Yes. We're in 92nd minute.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
And it's 2-2.
When I started the interview with Tim, Senegal was up 2-0. And I just looked up. It's tied at 2. Soccer's wild.
And, yeah, they were right there in a row. So we've got some drama in the Senegal-Belgium match, which the winner will take on the winner of course, USA and Bosnia.
That's right. This is a big match. And I feel like Senegal would have been a better matchup. Oh, my gosh, they almost scored again. They didn't. All right, we'll catch a break. Smitty, more on this. Smitty will walk us through the front office perspective here on how this all goes down for the next hour on the program. Get to the 5 o'clock hour of the show. We'll say goodnight at 6 on ESPN 700. Walker Kessler lives in Los Angeles, California now. The young center that developed so nicely under Will Hardy after being acquired via the Rudy Gobert deal has been traded to the L.A. Lakers in exchange for 4 unprotected first-round picks, one in 2031, one in 2033, and then first-round swaps in 28 and 2030. Richard Smith is live in studio. What the hell happened, man? We all thought he was back, and now he's in L.A., man. What's going on?
Spence, July 1st, free agency. Here we go.
Yes,
you
sir.
have no idea what's going on. What do we always say, Spence, about betting on the games, right?
Don't do it.
If anybody knew what they were talking about, they would all be living, what do I always say? They would all be living in Vegas,
right,
and making frequent visits to their private island in the Bahamas.
Correct.
If anybody knew what they were talking about. Okay.
Right.
So here you go. So a lot of levels to this, a lot of things I'm sure that were going on behind the scenes. Not surprising that it happened so quickly in free agency, because these things happen. Some of the stuff is backdoor stuff from the last few days that's going on. Some teams do it a little bit differently than others, but you could actually start talking to other teams, other people outside yesterday. And I'm sure a lot of that stuff was teed up already, and they had a lot of stuff going on. So not surprising that a decision was made as quickly as it is. Now, Spence, we do throw out there just this one caveat for our listeners who aren't privy or just not aware of how the NBA works. These are all agreements that are made right now. There's a moratorium that goes on between July 1st and July 5th. So these are all things that are agreed upon by all the parties. However, this is really no more legally than a handshake agreement until July 6th, and that's when all the paperwork starts getting done. So technically, which I don't expect it to happen, I'm not suggesting this, but somebody could have cold feet in the next 4 days on either side and start going, oh, no, what did I do? I don't want to go there, or we shouldn't let him go, or, whatever the thought process might be. And people could start wrangling around about, gee, I don't know if we really want to do that, because there is a moratorium in this period. So this isn't legally binding, if you will, until July 6th, when they do all the paperwork and all of that kind of stuff. So there is, a little wiggle room about possibly changing the terms or doing something different. I don't expect that to happen. I'm not suggesting that.
Yeah.
I'm just letting our listeners know that these are agreements that they've made today verbally, and that all the paperwork doesn't get signed until July 6th.
Yeah. And that makes this kind of like an awkward, few day period, always, right? For most
always.
of the. So why do you think this happened as quickly as it did, Smitty?
Well, I'm going to look at it from a couple different levels, Spence. And the first is that you have to assume that the Jazz have some other way of looking at this that the general public and the media is not doing that. Being in those rooms all the years that I was, a couple of thoughts come to my mind, and these are just through my lens of having been through a lot of these types of negotiations in the past. There's a couple of reasons that you could look at as potential possibilities as to why the Jazz made this move. One would be that they know something about Kessler and or his camp that told them that he's not going to come back on his third contract. In other words, this is a contract that's going off his rookie deal. The contract they agreed to is a 4-year deal with a player option on the 4th year. So what that really means is that it's a 3-year deal between the player and the team, and then after the end of the 3rd year, the player has a decision to make whether they want to opt in that 4th year or become an unrestricted free agent. So maybe there was some scenario where the Jazz either felt or maybe they were told by the Kessler camp that, he'll do whatever he has to do contractually, but the next contract, he is going to be out of here because he wants to play somewhere else. He wants to do a different thing, whatever it is. Hey, I heard Porter mention a minute ago the thing about his girlfriend, fiance, future wife, whatever the situation is, that, Porter, you get an extra 10 points because that stuff does come into play to some level with some guys. We've had guys in the past who have made decisions based on what their wife wanted to do or their wife didn't want to do. We had the big guy over in Spain who we drafted years ago who never came over because his wife said, I am not leaving Barcelona.
Which guy? Which player?
Ante Tomic.
Oh, Ante Tomic. That's right.
And he spent his whole career in Europe, 7'2" center. Not sure he was really an NBA difference maker kind of guy, but he was a guy we tried to bring over a couple different times because we had his draft rights, and we just knew, through his agent that, hey, you can talk to him all you want, but he's not coming because his wife says she is not leaving Barcelona. So that was that, okay? So that can be a real thing. All right. So that's one thing, is that if the Jazz knew in some way, shape, or form that, or they felt that we could get him here and bring him back, because that's our right under the restricted free agent process, but we know that this is only going to be a short-term, if you will, 3-year rental, because then when we get to that point, we feel, or he's told us in some way, he's going to then leave and do the Gordon Hayward thing and do what he wants to do the second half of his career. That's one possibility. I don't know that, obviously. The second possibility is that the Jazz Brain Trust, looking at the numbers, how these analytics work, how the numbers financially work, how all those things, how you have to project those things out for several years with your roster and your money, is that the Jazz looked at it and said the difference in production on the floor between Kessler in his 2 years ago when he played the full season and Nurkic last year when he played for the Jazz was very minimal in terms of the raw statistics. In other words, Kessler 2 years ago averaged 11 points, 12 rebounds a game. Nurkic last year averaged 11 points, 10 rebounds a game. Okay, so everybody feels, believes, sees that Nurkic isn't the player that Kessler is, doesn't quite have that impact. Kessler's 8 years younger, obviously, at 24 versus Nurkic, who's going to be 32 this fall. But they could have looked at the analytics and said, if we're paying Nurkic 11 a year and we would be paying Kessler $32 million a year, that's a difference of $21 million. Does it make that much difference? We have one guy or the other in the lineup to pay out an extra $21 million a year for that production. That's one other level that they could have been looking at and said, that doesn't make sense when we look at our entire financial landscape going forward. So those are two things, Spence, I would throw out there just as possibilities as to why defending the Jazz's decision. Having said that, all that long-winded stuff, the Jazz offered him $140 million for 5 years, which was they said no, that's not enough. The Lakers gave him $130 million for 4 years with a player option, so it really makes it a 3-year deal at $32 million a year. So it's one less year and a $4 million difference to Kessler. That's not a lot of money in NBA terms, obviously. So the Jazz had to have looked at it and said, we think we can get the production of the group overall, the influence of the group, to be somewhere in the ballpark where we don't think guaranteeing that kind of money makes a lot of sense to us. Okay. Again, I don't agree with it. I think it's short-sighted. That's my opinion. You don't get big guys that can do what he's shown he can do as a young guy who's getting better, got better the last 2 full years he played, 24 years old, almost 7'2", with the wingspan he has, with what he's already shown and proven he can do at the NBA level. He's a rim protector. He's an offensive rebounder. He's a rebounder in traffic. He's a good screen setter, and he's a good lob threat at the rim. Those guys, there's not a lot of those guys in the NBA. So if you have one of them, it's hard for me, if I was in the room to be arguing against the idea that but we'll figure it out some other way. No. This is we got a guy. We got a guy who does that. A guy who's proven he can do that. We hold on to him, whatever the cost is, other than being something ridiculous like an Anthony Davis contract next year, where Davis is going to opt into a $63 million a year deal. Okay, now you're getting ridiculous stuff. But to me, you don't give up that kind of guy in that regard. What did they get? Oh, they got a haul of draft picks. Spence, the unprotected draft picks are in 31 and 33. Spence, 5 years from now and 7 years from now. You know who's going to be on the team 5 years from now and 7 years from now? Maybe Darren Peterson.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe Ace Bailey. It's that to me is crazy in terms of feeling that is a big haul, and then you're getting pick swaps in 28 and 30, I think it was. Spence, last time I checked, the Lakers are now owned by Mark Walter, who owns the Los Angeles Dodgers, who is not afraid to spend money. You think he is going to let his team be a middling team or be in the bottom half of the NBA standings where the Jazz are going to benefit from a pick swap with the Lakers 2, 3, 4 years from now? There's no way. There's no way that he's letting that happen when he just signed Reeves to the deal he did and made this commitment to Kessler, right? And obviously with Doncic. So those, to me, that is, we gave the Jaren Jackson deal back at the trade deadline an A+, because I believe that was a home run any way you looked at it. This one, I have a hard time believing that this haul they got is going to bring them anything close to what Kessler could bring them in the next several years when they're supposedly trying to be competitive and moving up that competition scale. So to me, this is a very disappointing move, and I can see some of the financial stuff. I understand some of that if that were the case, but when you're building the team, that's a guy, to all accounts, as you interviewed the guys the other day who said he's part of our core, this is it, and somewhere they pivoted with some of this stuff happening behind the scenes.
All right, really good stuff there. So let's kind of dig into some of your breakdown piece by piece, and let me follow up with a few things because, look, you and I are of the same mindset with the draft picks, okay? There are a lot of people celebrating 4 unprotected first-round picks for Walker Kessler. You're seeing a lot of that, okay? And like you, when you understand how the ownership situation has changed in Los Angeles and what these guys are willing to do to spend money, the way that they're spending it on their baseball team, and yes, the rules are different, okay? But the way these guys have spent money in baseball might lead to a work stoppage in the sport. They don't give a rip about spending money. They're buying players left and right for the Dodgers. It's more punitive in basketball, but you still can do it if you have no problem paying some penalties here or there. But your point that needs to be underscored is it's highly unlikely that any of these 4 unprotected picks will be during a year where the Lakers are bad enough for this to be like a top 5 pick. Could it happen? Sure, crazy things happen. But the bigger part of this is these are way down the road when Markkanen's probably gone and Jackson's probably gone. Who knows? Yep. You just lost your best rim protector and another big body that you can throw at Victor Wembanyama, and a guy that you had developed who was really, really good, even though he was hurt all of that last season. Leading me to ask you this question. The Jazz offer 5,140. The Lakers offer is 4,130. That's not enough of a gap for me, that's not enough of a gap as the team that owns his rights to not just match.
Yep.
So what gives?
Yeah.
Like there's something here we're not seeing. It's either Walker and his camp sending a message like, no, he wants to play in Los Angeles. He wants the Lakers. He doesn't want to be here. Yeah. He won't report or whatever the hell it is. This simply not matching this offer sheet makes zero sense to me if you really wanted him back. There has to be more here, Smitty. There just has to be.
Well, that's why I say, a couple of the things, as I mentioned a minute ago. One, Could be where they got either direct comment or a feeling, or in discussion with his camp, whatever it could have been. That hey, if we sign, I'm going to say, look, Gordon Hayward did the same thing. Maybe it didn't play out as as publicly as this is in this day and age. But Gordon Hayward, his camp felt he should get more money. Ended up doing that, by the way. But he went and signed with Charlotte with an offer sheet when he was a restricted free agent. So at that time, the rules were a little bit different. You had 72 hours to match. 72 hours to make a decision as the home team. So in that regard, Gordon Hayward had put his name on a piece of paper with his signature saying, "I am ready to leave Utah tomorrow to go to Charlotte." And the Jazz said, "Whoa. You're coming back here. We're matching the offer sheet."
Right,
okay.
right.
So he got more money. He came back. He played the 3 years, and then he opted out, and then went to Boston, and everybody knows the story. That could be a similar case here. Could be something where the Jazz, we're told a similar thing is going to play out, that Kessler will do whatever he has to do. He's a good kid. He wants to work hard. He wants to develop his career, but in 3 years, he's going to exercise his right at that time to move on and do what he wants to do. That's a possibility. Obviously, we don't know that, but that could be a rationale. Part of what we said, and to Porter's point, could be something to do with his girlfriend who wants to be in L.A. I don't know about him going to L.A. and the Jazz acquiescing to that. I don't buy into any of that stuff.
Well, they didn't necessarily acquiesce. They just made a deal, right?
That's what I mean. So it's a business deal for them. So if they're deciding, okay, we're gonna cut bait, right? That old line, you either fish or cut bait. They decided if this is going to happen in 3 years, and we don't think we can convince him that this is your long-term home, and you can have a statue out in front in 15 years and all that kind of stuff to be with Peterson and Jackson and Markkanen and what have you, and do some special things, then we're just going to cut it off now, and we're going to get some draft picks, and we're just going to move on. That's a possibility. The draft picks they got, look, I don't have anything to weigh what those are, because they're so far out, and knowing the owner of the Lakers and how they're going to be, Spence, that is one of the major free agent destinations of the Los Angeles Lakers. So the Lakers don't have to recruit guys who are going to be free agents who are big-time guys in the league coming up. They want to go to L.A. That's one of the places they look at. So if you're setting yourself up as a team with Doncic, with Reeves, with the owner, with the money, those guys will come to you, okay? So this thing about pick swaps in 28 and 30 and the first-round pick in the 5 years out from now and 7 years out from now, to me, those things aren't that valuable at all, because you have no idea what they're going to be. To me, this is some version of like playing the cryptocurrency game where you're just, you're betting on future stuff that you have no idea how it's going to play out. And what you're giving up currently is a solid rim protector, potential difference maker guy who you have under contract, and you control him for the next several years. So I tend to agree with you. There is something else there that we're not aware of that caused them to give that up in terms of how they're trying to build this team and what they just told you in the last 48 hours.
Breaking news, the Boston Celtics have agreed to trade Jaylen Brown to the Philadelphia 76ers for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. So the Jaylen Brown Boston Celtics saga ends with Jaylen in Philly, Paul George to Boston, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. Rapid reaction there.
Yeah, you're trading with a division rival.
Contracts line up.
Yeah, the contracts line up. Paul George, effective player when he's healthy, been in and out this past year. Got fined for using illegal health substances of some sort. I don't know how much they're going to get out of Paul George for the next 2 years. So now again, they're banking on a couple of draft picks. So they're banking on the Sixers not being very competitive. The Sixers are saying, hey, we're going to have Joel Embiid and Jaylen Brown and Tyrese Maxey and VJ Edgecombe. We're going to be pretty good. So what are the Celtics? That feels to me just a knee-jerk reaction, like the Celtics are getting rid of a problem that was growing hour by hour in the recent days, and they just had to figure out how to solve that problem and move on. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. All right, back to the Jazz. As we discussed earlier, and if you missed it, the Jazz also signed Jackson Hayes to a 2-year, $12 million deal.
Okay, now it's over.
Championships.
You got it.
Hang the banner.
That's it.
So what we have now, as far as your center position, is Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes. As of yesterday, that was Walker Kessler, which sounded a lot more exciting. Help us understand, and we were discussing this during the first segment, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a very good defensive player and a good rim protector for his size. He's a shockingly average rebounder. Yep. I'm not sure how many people know that, and he certainly has never been a center. And he has said that himself in the past. Now, look, whether you like it or not, if your coach wants you to try it, you're going to try it. So if you look at what we have now protecting the paint in Utah, 24 hours ago was one of the best in the league, and now it's Nurkic, Jackson Hayes, Jaren Jackson Jr., Lauri Markkanen, Ace Bailey, Kyle Filipowski. They tried him at center last year. It was a nightmare, but they weren't trying to win. It's not just Victor Wembanyama. It's Nikola Jokic. I mean, we could go down the list of big players in the NBA that you need.
Hartenstein.
Yeah, that you need defensive pushback against. So what does the Jazz defense, Smitty, look like next year? Because for the last 3 years, it has not just been bad. It has been the worst in the NBA and, by some metrics, the worst in the history of the league. How do the Jazz guard next year?
Yeah, so first of all, they're banking on this move that the combination of the guys you just said, Nurkic is not going to do anything defensively as a big guy. He does not do that. Okay, so they're going to count on Jaren Jackson being a big cleanup guy, like Rudy Gobert was a big cleanup guy for guys. So, and Jaren Jackson works better as a 4 because he's mobile and he doesn't want to be rooted in the lane. He doesn't want to be, one of those big bodies that's standing there with his arms up trying to protect the rim. Walker Kessler does that very well. Now they don't have that. So now Jaren Jackson is going to have to be more mindful of his movement, of being able to get off his guy, to help out in the lane when guys attack the rim, to do the stuff that he's very good at, was Defensive Player of the Year several years ago, because he does that very well. The Jazz are counting on that to make up some of that difference with Kessler not being there. They're counting on Nurkic being some measure of offense that would be similar to Kessler, maybe a little better, I think, because he can shoot a little bit from the free throw area, facing up somewhat. He's older, so that's a stopgap measure for them, giving him a 2-year deal. But I think they probably figure that Jackson helps in that regard. They also probably figure somewhat, a little bit different deal, that Darren Peterson, who is very good on the defensive end and very active, not only with his feet, but with his length and his hands, can stop the ball and stop penetration that Keontae George does not do. So they're hoping that the combination of Peterson out front and then Jaren Jackson roaming and using his mobility in the lane area might take over some of that difference from Kessler. Being that stalwart in the middle, that might be part of their statistical analysis on that. I don't know. I just don't know how you give up a big guy who's coming. He's on the rise. He's not already here or on the slow decline. Okay, he's on the rise, and when you get those guys, Spence, to me, you got to figure out how to keep them. How to make that work. That's the job of the front office, the ownership. That's obviously the job of the coaching staff to figure that out. they saw it differently. I would disagree with them. Okay, nobody cares about that. But I think that they're looking at this like as some kind of long play, like I heard Ryan Smith mention in your interview with him the other day. We're in this long play. Well, now you're stretching out the long play with no content currently to give our fans. So they're banking that the other guys can make up, give me a number, 75%, 80% of what Kessler does. And they didn't think paying that money was worth that. So they figure they can move other pieces of the puzzle around to make that up enough to be competitive. I don't agree with that, but I can see where they might, the people in their room might use that as their justification.
I think this is a blow, Smitty. I think this is a gut punch. I think this, look, I understand. I've been on the team side. I've been on the media side. The team is going to propagate and spin what you want your fans to believe. I get it. So they're going to say draft picks, hey, future stuff. Yeah, look at us. We got 9 future firsts coming. They also got a trade exception worth half of Walker's salary during the first year.
Right.
More or less window dressing. Sometimes they're used. Oftentimes they're not, correct?
Right. That's correct because a trade exception just means that you have money that's kind of in the bank, if you will, where in the NBA, if you're trading one player for another player and you're both over the salary cap, it means that you can only trade a $20 million player for another $20 million player. But now if you have a trade exception, what that means in common layman's terms is if you have a $20 million player that you're trying to trade out, you only have to take back, as an example, $10 million player because you can throw in the trade exception that allows you to do the math to even out the trade. It gets a little complicated, but the gist of it is that it gives you as a team some flexibility in making potential trades. But you don't know what those trades are going to be. You don't know who that guy is going to be, who that's going to be that could come in and help affect winning, which is what we've heard from the Jazz the last couple of years. They were building to this moment, and they got Darren Peterson, and now they made the trade for Jackson. Now Kessler, we said Spence back a couple months ago, the whole thing this summer in the draft and the free agency was going to come down to what they decide to do with Walker Kessler. Are they going to blink when the number comes up, and they're going to have to react to that? And apparently they decided to fake left and go right and do a whole different thing. And so now we're going to, obviously, we won't know for a long time how that whole thing plays out. But on the surface and the immediate reaction, I would think most Jazz fans would be highly disappointed because they gave up a good young big that they had control of and let that go.
Yeah, look, again, I've tried to stretch my mind here to consider all the possibilities. As we've already dissected, it feels like there is more than meets the eye. Something about this doesn't smell right. I just feel like if you compare what the Jazz offered Walker and what the Lakers, the sheet that the Lakers offered him, that's not enough of a gap simply just to not match it and bring him back. So you've outlined the potential possibilities. Have you done the analytics that some combination of, I'm going to say this out loud, Yusuf Nurkic and Jackson Hayes gives you what Walker could have brought you? Yeah. Like, is that your calculation? Yeah. And then you save the money that you don't have to pay Walker. Here's the other stretch my mind possibility that I've tried to just give it some airspace. Is their timeline beginning with Darren Peterson and Ace Bailey at 19? Did they look at Oklahoma City and San Antonio and say they're so good and they're so young and we're so not close to them that we think we have 2 young, bright stars? And we're going to tell the fan base, we really love Lowry. We really love Jaren Jackson Jr. We think Keontae's this and Bryce Sensabaugh's that and Kyle Filipowski's this and Isaiah Collier's that. And then in the back of their mind, they're like, we're starting with Ace and Darren at 19. And we think in 4 or 5 years, maybe that's our time to crack a window. Smitty, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm just trying to talk about potential possibilities.
No. And you know, I understand what you're saying in that regard, Spence. And the argument to that obviously is that, so is that what we're doing? We're waiting for everybody else to start crumbling or everybody else to take a step back or two so we can try and do something instead of us being the aggressors. This is just like the porous defense that the Jazz have been playing the last several years, where they had the worst transition defense in the league, because when the ball was out on the open floor, they would just retreat, and then the ball's on top of the rim and the play's over. Okay, This feels to me, in a loose analogy, something like that, where they're saying, well, we can't compete with the San Antonios and the OKCs, maybe the Denvers, maybe who else you want to throw in there? Golden State can have some resurgence. I don't know. But so we're going to just keep, as you and I, Spence, know, growing up in the East Coast, kick the can down the road, right, and just wait for something else to come along. And so is that the way you're servicing your fans? Is that the way you're servicing your sponsors, your advertisers, everybody who's invested in your team, and you're saying, yeah, we're just going to keep rolling it over, we're just going to keep playing this other long game that isn't showing us any results at the moment, because someday the payoff is going to come. Spence, when's the payoff? Nobody knows. Is it 5 years when some kid now who's in junior high school literally becomes the next Darren Peterson and the Jazz get him in the 2033 draft or something? Who wants to wait around for that? All of those questions crop up. It'll be interesting to see if the Jazz, come forward, if and when they do a press conference about this, if they're going to give you any rationale, if they're just going to sidestep it, if they're going to be talking, about these, ephemeral things about, planning for the future and building something and the exciting and this and that. The stuff I heard Ryan Smith talk about the other day with you, and, I keep hearing it, but I don't see it. And now here's another example of you had something, but we're going to give it away, and we're going to do something else, and we're going to plan again for some future stuff. It's a very very interesting in that regard. So yes, maybe something else is going to come out. Maybe we're going to find out, and everybody's going to go, oh, I see what you. Okay, I got it. Okay, very good. Thank you for telling me. I don't know if we'll ever get that, right?
There has to be something there. There just does. As we've already, and we're at this point, we're doing the beating the dead horse over and over thing. It doesn't smell right. The offer sheet the Lakers were able to give Walker is not enough of a gap between what the Jazz said they were willing to pay him for them not to just match it. There's something else there.
Yeah, the money isn't the money thing. I agree with you there. That I would say that's true.
All right, before we catch a break, let me ask you this question. I believe I just scratched down the list. If I'm missing a name, let me know. Paul George, Jaylen Brown, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Walker Kessler, John Morant, Kawhi Leonard, LaMelo Ball, Julius Randle. Those are 8 very good, if not great, basketball players that have been moved this offseason. Player movement isn't new. This type of player movement feels kind of new. Is this now the league that we're in?
Yeah, and I think some of the teams are doing it out of financial stuff. The collective bargaining agreement. You've heard a lot of teams talk the last couple of years that this second apron stuff is just too. It's too punitive. It is not fair. That there has to be some other way to address the spending stuff. Because Mark Walter, who comes in as the new owner of the Lakers, taking over for the Buss family, he's worth over $13 billion. We've seen what he's done with the Dodgers in Major League Baseball. I don't expect him to do much different with the Lakers, because the Lakers are a similar brand to the Dodgers in terms of professional basketball around the world, and he's not going to let the Laker brand wallow around in mediocrity because of that. That's been his MO. So I think they found the team with a player that was willing to do something. Again, not sure why, but they got a guy that they believe in. They added Kessler to Doncic and Reeves, and now they're going to build around those guys. And I think that the Jazz are going to, at some point, they're going to have to address the rationale for giving up a good young guy like this right when you feel like they're about ready to go.
Oh, man. Was not expecting to be talking about this story today, but we'll continue to. Smitty is live in studio. I want to let you know that Benson Boone, Somber, Steven Sanchez, and more are live. Yours Always Music Festival is coming to the Utah State Fair Park October the 2nd and the 3rd. Tune in around noon this week for your chance to score a pair of tickets and passes to the festival. Get tickets now and learn more at yoursalwayslc.com. All right, more with Smitty coming up next on ESPN 700. All right, Richard Smith is live in studio for one more segment. Smitty, you missed Porter's fist pump after you gave him a 10-point prize for his take on Walker Kessler's girlfriend. If you just hopped in the car, Walker Kessler lives in Los Angeles. Porter, let's give you the space again since you were fist pumping that Smitty gave you a 10-point bump. Your conspiracy theory is Walker's girlfriend is driving all of this.
No.
Well, that's 5-point bump then.
Just wanted to point out that it's a variable.
Yeah, and to Porter's point, that's pretty commonplace.
Yeah, we've had that Porter. That has happened in the past. We've experienced it with the Jazz on a few occasions. Where those are real life issues, and when you're getting down to Spence, you've used the phrase before. Millionaires fighting with each other, the Jason Kidd thing or something.
No. When he said, you guys don't get it, we're millionaires cheering for each other.
Yeah. So, if Walker Kessler's, trying to decide between $28 million a year and $32 million a year, we would always try and bring it back to the reality that most of those numbers that you are never going to see those. That's not going to affect your life. What it ends up being is now it becomes an ego thing. Now it becomes, the other guy in the other locker, 3 lockers away from me is making $2 million more than me, even though neither one of them ever sees the $2 million difference because of, the lifestyle they're living anyway. But, having an opportunity to, now maybe it's not the Lakers. Maybe this is, maybe they had an opportunity to do this. Would he have done this if it was going to Milwaukee? Or if he was going to, I don't know, Charlotte or someplace where, you're not talking about that kind of stuff. But that can come into play. I'm not suggesting that it is in this case, but those things are not out of reach when you're talking about how young people in the NBA that are being thrown around numbers like this that change their lives and their families' lives can sway a decision that they're trying to make.
Let's see. I will try to pronounce this young man's name. So the Lakers made 3 other acquisitions today outside of grabbing Walker Kessler for the Jazz for 4 unprotected first-round picks. Sandro Mamukelashvili.
Yeah.
Do you know much about him? They paid him $52 million.
No, he's a big guy who played at Seton Hall. European guy, came over, played 4 years.
It's fully guaranteed money.
Very good. Very good for a big guy.
Okay.
Good stretch 5, 3-point shooter. Really, and a good culture guy, like really one of those upbeat, high energy guys that everybody loves being around.
Cool.
And he's partly a guy who you'd pay some of that money for his on-court ability and some of that money for what he brings to the team culture and the group as a whole.
Senegal, by the way, was just called for a very harsh penalty kick. Belgium converted. So 3-2 Belgium. They're deep in extra time. Oh, you just feel so bad for these Senegal fans who they were up 2-0, and Belgium has scored 3 consecutive goals, and they're showing these poor fans in the stands just crying tears. The World Cup is awesome. We are about an hour and 25 minutes away from the U.S. men's national team taking on Bosnia. And it looks like if the U.S. men's national team wins, they will take on Belgium, who is about to eliminate Senegal with about 4 minutes left in the match. Quentin Grimes also signed in L.A. today, 4 years, $60 million. Former Jazzman Colin Sexton, 2 years, $19 million deal with the Lakers as well. So if you missed it, just to clean some stuff up, Walker Kessler has been traded to the Lakers for 4 unprotected first-round picks. The Jazz signed Yusuf Nurkic a couple of days ago to a 2-year, $22 million deal. And then they pivoted and signed Jackson Hayes today, 2 years, $12 million deal. Smitty, just give us a quick rundown on Jackson Hayes, who has always had tremendous athleticism and maybe not much else.
Yeah, he's an agile big guy, not very strong, not a guy who's going to really help you a lot. In the lane, banging bodies. He's more of a movement 5 guy. Runs the floor fairly well. Long. Can can use some activity, but he's never really played to the level that you thought he would when he came out of Texas. He played 1 year at Texas, and then came out and was a lottery pick in the draft that he came out in, but has never really achieved the level that people thought he might be able to because of his agility for a guy his size at 7 feet. So he's going to come in as a backup guy, and to Nurkic, I would assume, and just a guy who's also, I would guess, is some kind of a placeholder at that position.
This news broke earlier. Tobias Harris is signing with the Spurs.
Yeah.
2 years, $31 million. It just feels like an awesome match, right? I mean, I know he's a little bit older, but I think they tried this role with Harrison Barnes, and Harrison Barnes, I think, is probably done. And so maybe Tobias Harris kind of slides into
for
that.
Another year. Harrison Barnes signed, right?
Just an embarrassment of riches. But as far as like maybe minute distribution, what do you think this looks like with Tobias Harris now added to the group?
Tobias Harris has had for him not a spectacular career, but when you look at what he's been able to accomplish over the years financially, he's always seems to be in the right place at the right time, getting paid. Probably bigger numbers than he actually earns on the floor, but he's a real hard worker. He's a real culture guy. He fits right in with what the Spurs are about, especially with their young core. He'll come in and give them some of that veteran leadership. He's a pro's pro. He comes to work every day. People love working around him. He's just a coach's dream because he just does what the coaches ask him to do day in and day out. And, it's a great – I'm surprised Detroit didn't bring him back because of what he meant to them the last couple of years. But San Antonio getting another guy to come in and help them, continue their ascension in the league.
So some other things have gone down today. If you missed it, the long-awaited Jaylen Brown trade is complete. Jaylen Brown is going to Philly, as the Boston Celtics have agreed to trade him for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. So that has gone down. The LeBron domino is still out there. The Jazz, as I referenced, they, after trading Walker Kessler, signed Jackson Hayes to put him next to Yusuf Nurkic to compete for whatever minutes are left at center. Kelly Oubre is leaving Philly and going to Indiana. I don't know what Philly's doing. Quentin Grimes, Paul George, Kelly Oubre. I mean, does it feel like they might just be pivoting towards Maxey and VJ Edgecombe? And maybe can they shed Embiid? If they tried to, could they?
Well, because you only need one team to take on a contract like that. Mike Gansey is the new general manager, comes over from working over a decade with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so he's looked at it and said, hey, we're not a championship level team. So if you feel that, and those are the expectations from ownership, then it doesn't matter who you trade out. It matters who you're trying to bring in and how you're trying to change the vibe. And obviously Philly's trying to do that now, trying to bring in, if they bring in Jaylen Brown to go with Embiid and go with Maxey and Edgecombe in the backcourt, maybe that gives them a little more oomph. To try and ride this Embiid train out the next couple of years.
Boston Celtics grabbed Mitchell Robinson from New York today.
Yeah.
$47 million deal. James Dolan said he's not going into the luxury tax to bring the championship team back, and this move indicates just that, because I was actually debating this with a buddy of mine today who's a Knicks fan, like, are they going to bring Mitchell Robinson back? And I said, well, if he's willing to take a contract that's kind of like 3 years, 15 millish, they should bring him back. That's the contract he signed with Boston, and now the Knicks don't have a backup center. And with Karl Anthony Towns as your starting center, 2 issues. Not super injury plagued, but he's going to miss some time. But no one commits more dumb fouls than Cat. So you need a backup center in New York. What do you make of the Knicks losing Mitchell Robinson?
Yeah, it'll hurt them a little bit. It depends who else they get to come in and play that role. I've never been a big Mitchell Robinson guy, although I know he gives you some effort, especially on the boards. He's willing to do that dirty work. Obviously, as we saw in the playoffs, even though they were able to do without it, he can't make a free throw, and so that's he's limited in that role. I think 15 for him. I think that's he should be thanking his agent, to get somebody like Boston to give him that kind of money, because I don't think he's that that kind of a guy. I think he fit a nice role in New York, and now he's going to Boston on getting the money and getting paid, which is good for him.
There's still this kind of rumor out there about the potential of Jalen Duren forcing his way out of Detroit, who's also a restricted free agent like Walker was, and maybe Sacramento being the destination, and maybe Detroit lands Domo Sabonis, excuse me. That's not anything that's been done, but obviously Dennis Lindsey, our buddy running the Detroit Pistons, feels like, I mean, the Jazz losing Walker Kessler hurts, and I think the Pistons losing Jalen Duren would hurt too, right?
Yeah, I think so. He's a good young body. Similar scenario as Walker Kessler in terms of his age and the contract situation. Again, Dennis is an analytics leaning guy, and I could see the Pistons saying, hey, we can get whatever the number would be, 80% of his production and what he does for the group. If we had this other guy doing it and this other guy move over a different position, or we bring in a guy as a free agent and we don't want to commit that kind of money, because a lot of times those kind of things, Spence, are also related to what the team and the ownership is trying to plan for down the road financially. Who do we have to pay next year? Who do we have to pay 2 years from now? And how does all that stuff fit into the grand equation? For the Jazz, that is the purview of Steven Schwartz, who's the cap guru for the Jazz, and figuring all that stuff out and making those kind of projections. And I can see where Detroit could be looking at something like that and saying we're not sure that paying Duren the kind of money he wants makes sense in terms of looking at the picture as a whole, especially when they got a big-time guy like Cade Cunningham who is there, wants to be there, and will be running the show for a while.
So does it feel like the Jazz are done here? They had that $15 million non-taxpayer exemption to use. I wonder if that part of that goes to Jackson Hayes. Without Walker's money on the books, look, they're at about 168.7 right now with, I think, 13 players under contract if you count Jackson Hayes. They did announce the signing of Darren Peterson today. What can you share as far as what other mechanisms they have at their disposal to add talent, and whether or not you think they're going to try to do something else, or is this the group?
Yeah, well, it depends if they like. They're not going to make any big-time commitment to anybody who's out there who they don't think is any kind of a difference maker, especially when you're in the position that the Jazz are in at the moment, where they're not really, to this moment in time, they have not been a competitive team the last few years. So they're not going to give any kind of money to anybody that they don't think can really bump them 2, 3, 4 steps up the ladder very quickly. So they may make some kind of a minor signing here coming up in the next couple days, but this might be the group they have, for this year going into the fall. There could be a trade that's made somewhere. I don't know what that would be. It could be just that they're, again, as we said earlier, Spence, they could just be punting this ball, to get another possession, next year or the year after or what have you, which again, to me personally, from my perspective, would be very disappointing if that's how they're treating this situation.
All right, Smitty, last thing for you. I'll set you loose on this. The Kawhi Leonard trade. So the Clippers are pivoting, and they're moving into a space of trying to get draft picks and young players so they can kind of do a reset after the Kawhi, Paul George, Ivica Zubac, the whole hypothetical deal just didn't work out. So, ironically enough, Kawhi Leonard is going back to Toronto in exchange for Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, and some draft capital. The question is, as a guy that's been around the league for as long as you've been around the league, it does appear as of now the Clippers and their owner, Steve Ballmer, and the cap circumvention investigation involving this company that was totally fraudulent, their founder and CEO is in jail for 14 years. Look, I don't want you to go conspiracy theory on me, but there's something about this that doesn't feel right. It feels like maybe it was like, hey, if you trade him, and then maybe this will go away. But they also got a bunch of they got a decent return for a guy that if he stuck around, maybe they would have been in trouble. I don't know. This just doesn't feel great.
Yeah, well, the Clippers had a plan in place the last couple of years. it didn't work out, especially this past season. They got off to the horrendous start. Even though in the middle of the season they played very well, they were one of the hotter teams in the league in the middle of the season, and then it got bounced in the playoffs. But the whole thing didn't work out. The Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden thing, where they gave Harden the money, and then Paul George said, "Just give me the same money," and then they said, "No, no." Then I want more money than I want out, and all this stuff. The whole thing just kind of crumbled at their feet, which is interesting because Steve Ballmer, the owner, the richest guy in professional sports, that stuff, they put all those eggs in that basket. Remember, they traded last year for John Collins from the Jazz, brought him in. They brought in Bradley Beal on a small contract, hoping he could be also part of that. It was almost like a mini all-star team type of feeling at the beginning of the season, where they thought they had a lot of parts working for them, and it just didn't. It fell apart at the seams right at the beginning. Never got traction. Got rid of Harden. It didn't sign Paul George. He went to Philly, and obviously now getting rid of Kawhi Leonard. So it looks like the whole thing is they're trying to restart. Where they get to, I don't know. Steve Ballmer's not going to give up, and certainly money isn't the problem. So they got to figure out something else with their roster that just didn't work the last couple of years the way they had envisioned it.
Where do you think LeBron plays his final year, Smitty?
It just feels to me like he's going to end up going back home to Cleveland, because I think also if you're realistic about the competitive part of it, I think you could argue that a path to the NBA Finals for him would be easier through the Eastern Conference than it would be through the Western Conference, and the homecoming thing and all of that with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley just feels to me like that's probably where it's going to end up settling.
Well, what a wild day. Never thought, I did not think that this was going to end with Walker playing for anybody else outside of the Jazz, but it has. He is in L.A., and Jackson Hayes is in Salt Lake. They were not traded for each other, to be clear. Great to see you. Have a good night, okay? Go home, go home and watch some soccer, will you?
I am. Okay. I am going home, yeah. Right. USA.
There you go. There you
USA.
go. Belgium has advanced. They were trailing 2-0. It's a 3-2 win over Senegal. If the U.S. beats Bosnia tonight, they will play Belgium in the next round. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The final hour of the program is next on ESPN 700. I feel like you always play this to end a show when bad news has happened across the marketplace to the Jazz, the Utes, the Cougars, RSL. Somebody has received some bad news, and you play this as our last bump to try to make everyone feel better. Am I onto something here?
Ish. Little Rolling Stones. Can't always get what you want, I think.
But you get what you need.
If you try sometimes.
That's what I'm saying.
Not necessarily bad news all the time. Just news that, it depends on which perspective you hold. You just can't always get what you want. It's a good reminder, I think, regardless of which side you fall on, that sometimes the cards just fall how they are, and you don't always get what you want.
Well, for what it's worth, folks that believe in like, hey, let's do the trade grades, huh? Let's do some trade grades today. So if you look at, we'll just go with, because Kevin Pelton, friend of the show, used to do trade grades for ESPN. Now it's a guy named Zach Cram, who I don't know, but if you pull up his picture, he looks like a goob. He looks like a guy that wants to analyze basketball with a calculator. So the transaction, and if you missed it, you've probably been busy all day, or maybe you're not a huge sports fan, but that wouldn't make sense because why would you be listening to this show if you're not a sports fan? The LA Lakers have traded 4 unprotected picks. Well, 2 unprotected picks and then 2 first-round swaps. But that's essentially 4 unprotected first-round picks. And Walker Kessler goes to the Utah Jazz. So ESPN's new resident nerd, Zach Cram, gives the Utah Jazz an A+. A+. The Jazz have also signed, of course, Yusuf Nurkic, who was here last year, to a 2-year, $22 million deal. And then they brought in Jackson Hayes, who was with the Lakers, on a 2-year, $12 million deal. So those are your 2 starting centers as of now, and Zach gives the Lakers a C-. Okay, and then he goes on to explain his reasoning. Of course, a lot of these goobs love draft capital. Smitty and I discussed this earlier, and I feel the same way about this as I felt about the Mitchell and the Gobert deals. When Rudy and Donovan were traded, and the Jazz got all the draft capital they did in exchange for those 2 players, it's a wait-and-see thing. You don't know what the draft picks are going to turn into. You have no idea. Now, they also got Lauri Markkanen, who has turned into a really good player, and Walker Kessler, who looked like he was turning into a good player, but now he's not here. It's impossible to know whether or not this was a good or a bad deal until it's fully baked, which that won't be until 2033. So I guess we can revisit in 7 years. For today, I always say this: are you better today than you were yesterday based off the trade you made? The Jazz are a worse basketball team today than they were yesterday based off of this trade. Is there any way to refute that, Porter? The simple sentence, and this is always the thing you say in the league: are we better today than we were yesterday based off the trade we just made? The Jazz aren't better today than they were yesterday.
They're not, and there is no way to refute that. I guess I go back to the timeline discussion, right? And if you were really, really excited about the Jazz being like a bubble team this year, right, or maybe a team that can make things interesting in a first-round matchup, then today probably kind of sucks for you. But again, I think that, as you mentioned, the draft picks aren't going to materialize for 4 or 5, 6 years in some cases. The other part of this is a draft pick for, a front office with a bunch of upheaval or inconsistency. That's one thing. A bunch of draft picks for Danny and Austin Ainge and this unit seems to be a really valuable thing. And at least what we've seen so far, right? These draft picks are Darren Peterson, Keontae George, Ace Bailey. These are guys that have given you a good return so far on the draft picks that you have traded for. And yeah, you have to be honest with yourself. The Jazz are worse today than they were 24, 48 hours ago. But I guess my only silver lining there is that I don't think this was a team that was going to contend in 1 or 2 years. Yes, they were going to be a lot better, but I think that this gives you a little bit of insight into where the timeline actually is, rather than where, from a fan perspective, even from a media perspective here in Salt Lake, who just wants meaningful, fun basketball in Salt Lake City, our timeline may have been a little bit different than where the Jazz realistic timeline is, and I think we're seeing that unfold. The other part is, Spence, we're seeing so much player movement now that for the Jazz to essentially get back most of the draft capital that they lost in the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, now they have all that roster. What's the
optionality, baby?
Optionality.
That's a new NBA catchphrase.
They have all that roster optionality that they had a year ago.
Do they have bites at the apple
today? And now they have another bite at the apple.
Okay.
If, say, another Jaylen Brown situation arises in the next offseason, someone comes available, the Jazz can strike when it's hot and find someone that does fit their timeline. Even though Walker Kessler did fit their timeline, I just think that was a lot of money to play for a guy who, again, admittedly is a really good, above average center, elite defender, but a player who I think if you really need to, you can find a Walker Kessler in one of those, 2026, 2027, 2028 first round picks that you have now accumulated. I think you can, if you're confident in your scouting ability, you can find another Walker Kessler in one of those picks, and you have him on a rookie deal, not one that's costing you $140 million.
Does this give them multiple shots on goal?
World Cup?
Yeah.
Tease there.
Multiple shots on goal, bites of the apple, and optionality all in one.
In fact, it gives you more shots on goal than you had before. They may just be, later on down the road.
Some other pieces of news, just in case you missed it, of course, today has been a lot about the Jazz and how they're going to figure it out. As far as their paint defense goes, they don't have a great perimeter defensive team yet. That might change. Ace can guard. Darren hopefully can guard. Keontae hopefully will at least try to learn how to guard. But the whole thing was because of Keontae's growth offensively, we think he's ready to step in and kind of be a featured piece, but he's got to learn to play defense. But until he does, we've got Walker, so we're good. Well, they don't now. What does that mean? Yusuf Nurkic, Jackson Hayes are your two centers on the depth chart, then Jaren Jackson Jr. Ace Bailey has great length. I view Ace as kind of a 2/3, and then Lowry certainly is not a center. So we'll see if they do anything else moving forward. The cupboard of draft picks does put you on a list of teams that can strike when a player is available. Now, the problem is also on that list of teams is Oklahoma City and San Antonio. So, look, it depends on how you look at it. I believe that in a vacuum for today, the Jazz are not nearly as exciting to consider the possibilities for this year today as they were yesterday. And I do think Walker was a big piece of that. Yeah, Austin Ainge yesterday on this show talked about how excited he was because they were going to be big, they were going to be different with a front line that was going to be massive. Walker was part of that, and he no longer is. So we'll see. But the long-awaited Jaylen Brown trade was completed earlier. Jaylen Brown is going to Philly for Paul George, 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. I don't like this trade for Boston. I am one that believes that you ride with Jaylen Brown. I like Jaylen Brown. I don't really understand why Boston has long been thought to looking to move him. So that was the other big piece that came down today, a bunch of other small pieces. I do think what happened with Mitchell Robinson, the Knicks backup center, who played pretty well in limited minutes. And if Karl Anthony Towns is your starting center, you've got to worry about health, but you also have to worry about him picking up the literal dumbest fouls of any player in the league. And Mitchell Robinson, one of the best backup centers in the NBA, is now a Celtic. And the contract he signed, I know Smitty disagrees with me, but when I was in Porter, we'll bring you in on this. I played in the Media AM tournament today, and my cart partner was one Easton Folster, who's the executive director of the UGA, and we were discussing this.
Friend of the program.
Indeed, and Jimmy Dolan, better known as the kazoo player and lead singer of JD and the Straight Shot, it took him 24 hours to open those stupid veneers in that big dumb mouth to say we are not going to pay luxury tax for the team. First of all, the business is good at Madison Square Garden. You have the money to do it. If there ever was a time to justify it, it's after the team wins a championship. And I said to Easton, okay, they bring back Landry Shamet. The bulk of the team that really won it is coming back. Mitchell Robinson is the big piece. If it's like $15 million a year, then I think Dolan would do that. And it turns out that it was exactly $15 million a year. It was like 3 for 47 or whatever. This shows that what Dolan said is he is not paying luxury tax dollars for this championship basketball team. He's just not.
Which it doesn't surprise you at all.
Just sucks.
But it absolutely does suck. And if you were going to reward your organization, your team, your fans at any point in time, you'd think it would be in the weeks after winning an NBA championship. And I don't get it. If you are a single billionaire and you're an NBA owner or whatever, okay, fine. Dolan has all the money in the world and he didn't earn
any of it.
Okay. You know more than I. And that's the hard part to me. Like, you look across the aisle and you see Steve Cohen paying everything he can to get the Mets, maybe not be working, but to get the Mets up to championship contention. You see it in Los Angeles with the Dodgers, where they have no qualms about paying for it. You see it with the LA Clippers allegedly going around the NBA salary stuff in order to get their championship, which obviously that's not working either. But you have very, very wealthy owners who are going out of their way to try to win. And to see James Dolan kind of back off of that a little bit, maybe because he's content. He got the one. That sucks. That sucks as a Knicks fan.
It does.
Pay the guy. And here's the thing. Mitchell Robinson, we know his limits as a player. We know that he can't shoot free throws. He is a pretty kind of one-trick pony when it comes to defending the rim and being a rim runner. But if it wasn't for Mitchell Robinson, those end-of-game situations go a little differently, and we may be talking about a very different result with the NBA Finals and with the New York Knicks. He was a huge part, even if it was just during really, really crucial times of getting that title done.
The most famous offensive rebound in New York Knicks basketball will probably always belong to Mitchell Robinson, who helped seal the deal and get him a ring. By the way, the Utah Mammoth were busy today. In case you missed it, the Utah Mammoth were able to acquire Vincent Tocek from the New York Rangers, and that solves their center issue after trading J.J. Peterka. Vincent Tocek is a really good player, and he's a vet. He's 32. He had 16 goals and 37 assists last year. This is a guy that has scored 239 goals and 392 assists in his career. And then they went out and grabbed the captain from the Islanders. So a couple of New York players coming out to Utah, as Anders Lee is your newest left winger for the Utah Mammoth, and another vet. He's 35. So pretty interesting stuff from the Utah Mammoth today. In exchange, let's see, so they signed Anders Lee to a 3-year deal worth $5.4 million annually. They traded for Tocek. And they traded Sean Dursey. Oh, they traded Cole Bedouin, one of their best prospects, a 3rd-round pick in the draft as well. But you got to trade something to get something. And 2 veteran attacking hockey players on their way to Salt Lake City. So some good stuff there. All right, Porter, time to get out of here. Let's go watch a little U.S. men's national team soccer against Bosnia starting in just a few minutes. What's coming up on a Thursday edition of the show?
Yep, as you mentioned it, we'll have recap of U.S. men's national team, and then we'll talk a bunch of hoops. Sarah Todd drops by the program to talk some Jazz. Chad Ford to talk some NBA draft. Dave McMiniman on the latest off-season chaos. And then our weekly check-in for some PGA Tour talk with our friend Paul Pugmire.
All right, there you go. So join us for a Thursday edition of the program, and we will say goodnight for today. Special thank you to Amy Donaldson, Tim McMahon, and Richard Smith. If you miss any of the sound from the show, go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download the mobile app and take us on the go. And then for what we do every day, 4 hours, podcast page is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a good Wednesday evening. We'll talk to you on a Thursday drive. As always, you can catch it right here on ESPN 700.